Chapter 1123. The Japanese Empire was an island country. Not to mention the military's warships, even the civilian ships were innumerable. It was just finding some ships to send a message to Beiming. It wasn't a big deal. For the sake of safety, 10 teams of envoys were sent out this time to guard against the 5-star army's interception on the sea. Ashikaga Yoshimasa was really careful. The 10 teams of envoys scattered. Some of them were intercepted by the 5-star army, so the news was leaked. But in the end, some ships were lucky enough to cross the sea and arrived at Beiming. Through the intercepted ships, the 5-star army knew about Ashikaga Yoshimasa's actions and reported it to Yang Chendong. Looking at the statement sent to him, Yang Chendong coldly snorted and said, "Just a trapped beast. Do you really think you can stop my army in this way? Humph, Beta Persei. Send a report to Su Yozhin. He should know what to do. Also, inform the frontline army to speed up their march. We don't have much time left." Beiming, Kyoto. The envoys of the Japanese Empire, who had weathered the waves, finally arrived here. Then they hurriedly sent a letter to the Ministry of Rights that was in charge of foreign affairs. In their opinion, the Japanese Empire was in danger. The Emperor of Beiming should summon them soon. But they didn't expect that they would wait for several days. It wasn't that the letter didn't reach Zhu Qiyu's hands. Nowadays, the imperial power was still very prestigious. Even if the Minister of Rights was Hu Xiao, Yang Chendong's father-in-law, he still didn't dare to suppress this matter. So the problem didn't come from the Ministry of Rights, but from the imperial court. After Zhu Qiyu saw the letter from the Ministry of Rights, he immediately called for a court meeting to discuss the matter of sending troops. What he didn't expect was that when it came to sending troops to the Japanese Empire, the reaction of the ministers was surprisingly similar. They all didn't agree to send troops. Among them, the Crown Prince's junior tutor, Grand Secretary and Minister of Justice Su Yozhin was the most opposed. "Your Majesty, in order to resist foreign aggression, we must first pacify our internal affairs. We haven't even solved our own problems yet, so how can we possibly help the Japanese Empire? You have to think twice before making a decision." On the surface, Su Yozhin and Yang Chendong were irreconcilable enemies. Because of this, Zhu Qiyu deeply trusted and relied on Su Yozhin. Now that he was the first to speak, the other officials also began to chime in one after another. "Your Majesty, young Master Su's words are reasonable. What we should do now is to solve the problem of Shaojing and Jingzhou. We shouldn't divide our forces to help others." "Yes, Your Majesty. According to the letter, the Japanese Empire is already on the brink of destruction. Even if we send troops now, how big of a problem can we solve?" "Yes. Fighting across the sea is disadvantageous to our supplies. Once something happens, it will be a big problem. Thinking about how the Japanese Empire would often invade our seas in the past, they deserve to be in trouble now." "Everyone is right. I second the motion." "I second the motion." All kinds of opinions appeared, but the general idea was the same. That was, they should not send troops to help the Japanese Empire. The so-called "the lips are cold and the teeth are cold" was certainly reasonable. However, Beiming and the Japanese Empire were separated by the sea, so this statement was difficult to hold. Especially in the period when the marine industry was not developed, no one would feel any danger or threat. In their eyes, Beiming's safety was the most important thing. At least, the Japanese Empire, a small vassal state across the sea, was not their concern. Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the golden dragon throne, originally had a solemn look on his face. When he saw the letter of Ashikaga Yoshimasa saying that he was willing to serve Beiming for generations to come, and when he saw that the tribute would be doubled every year, he was a little tempted. Being able to gain fame and profit at the same time, this kind of thing was what the Supreme Emperor liked to do the most. However, he did not expect the officials to react so fiercely. This was really beyond his expectations. Of course, with his identity as the emperor, he could make all the decisions on his own, and the officials below could not say anything. However, right when he was exerting pressure on the 5-star army and even had a great victory in front of him, it would not be a good thing if he disheartened the officials. Zhu Qiyu was naturally willing to help others without affecting herself. If she could gain fame and benefits, she would naturally be willing to do it. However, he did not want the Beiming court to fall into instability because of this. At this moment, he became hesitant. Zhu Qiyu did not know that after Su Yozhin received the telegram from the Security Bureau, he immediately did a lot of work. Ever since he chose to follow Yang Chendong, he was wholeheartedly loyal to the 5-star army. At the same time that Zhu Qiyu was forcefully withholding the salaries of the officials, he used the money that Yang Chendong gave him to rope in many people. Right now, at least a fifth of the officials in the court had received benefits from him. At this moment, it was time to show off his power. He had secretly contacted many people, and under the reasonable, polite explanation, there were many people who followed his lead blindly. For example, in the court now, those who spoke first were all arranged by him. Under the guidance of public opinion, some officials who did not know what was going on were also persuaded and expressed their own opinions. Yang Chendong's plan was effective. Considering that there were too many objections in the court, Zhu Qiyu did not bring up the matter of sending troops. He only said that he was thinking about it. Using this time, Yang Chendong commanded the 5-star army to gallop on the battlefield of the Japanese Empire, reducing the territory and strength of the Japanese army. It had been more than 20 days since the last time he sent out a request for help, and there was still no news that was beneficial to him. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was originally sitting in the military tent, could no longer sit still. He once again called his trusted subordinate, Maori Regularization, to discuss how to solve the crisis. When there were only 2 people in the tent, Ashikaga Yoshimasa said, "This general wishes to send someone to send a letter to Nankeido's Kuroda and have him come to meet us. What do you think?" When Ashikaga Yoshimasa finished speaking, Maori Regularization's body clearly tensed up. The Japanese Empire's navy was still very strong, and they had a lot of soldiers. Right now, there were at least 300,000 Japanese Empire's navy in Nankeido. This was also the foundation of the Japanese Empire's navy. It's just that the 5-star army's navy was more powerful, especially the cannons on the ship had a longer range, so they didn't display their strength. But even so, the 5-star army's navy didn't underestimate the strength of the 5-star army. There was news that came back that the 5-star army in Nankeido didn't attack, which was enough to explain everything. It was impossible for Ashikaga Yoshimasa not to know this, but now, he wanted to transfer the navy out. Didn't he know that if he took the initiative to break through the siege, he would suffer heavy losses? But he still wanted to do this. The meaning behind it was a little bit personal. Maori Regularization's mind quickly thought of a possibility. That is, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was really afraid of the 5-star army, so he left himself a way out. After all, with the help of the navy, they would have the ability to leave the Japanese Empire at any time. In addition to here, they could choose a new place to live. And without the help of a powerful navy, everything would be impossible. Could it be that the admiral is already prepared for the worst? Maori Regularization looked up at Ashikaga Yoshimasa and nodded. This is also good. Although we will suffer some losses, it's not a long-term solution. Since Ashikaga Yoshimasa has already made a decision, even if Maori Regularization wanted to stop it, it would be difficult for him to do it. If he didn't do it well, he would offend the admiral, which would be very bad for his future. Maori Regularization agreed, which wasn't beyond Ashikaga Yoshimasa's expectations. He smiled and said, "Very well, things are settled like this." Ashikaga Yoshimasa was indeed prepared to lose and escape. In the face of the powerful offensive of the 5-star army, he knew that some things were irreversible, especially after he didn't get a reply from Beiming. This idea became even more firm. But what he didn't expect was that this backup plan accelerated the collapse of the entire Japanese army. Unlike the 5-star army, who had a radio station that was beyond this era, there were only 2 ways to send a letter to the Kuroda family. One was to send a letter by carrier pigeon, and the other was to send someone to deliver the letter. For the sake of insurance, both methods were used, and it was this decision that gave the 5-star army time to prepare in advance. A carrier pigeon in the sky was not so easy to catch, especially a well-trained carrier pigeon. But this thing was not completely guaranteed. Accidents like carrier pigeons were not uncommon. In order to double insurance, Ashikaga Yoshimasa sent an inconspicuous civilian ship to Nankeido. Things went bad because of this civilian ship. The outskirts of Nankeido were already completely sealed off. Even Han Chinese civilian ships and merchant ships were not allowed to pass inspection, let alone a civilian ship of the Japanese Empire. So under the strict inspection, the messenger was found, and the matter of the Supreme General giving the order to break out of the encirclement was no longer a secret. His subordinates immediately reported the situation to Yang Chendong with a telegram. After hearing this, Yang Chendong, after serious consideration, decided to beat them at their own game. If everything was peaceful on the grasslands, Yang Chendong was not prepared to give any Japanese army a way out. They could only choose to surrender or die. But now the situation on the outskirts was not good, and the new Second Army could face a big problem at any time. Time waited for no one, and the Japanese Empire's matter had to be solved quickly. Among them, the Japanese Naval Division was in existence that gave Yang Chendong a great headache. 300,000 soldiers, a great advantage in terms of numbers, plus the existence of small cannons, it would not be easy to bite this hard bone. In addition, this Kuroda was not someone to be trifled with. According to the intelligence personnel hidden in Nankado, the security there was stable, which eliminated the possibility of an internal attack. Yang Chendong was worried about how to deal with this group of Japanese army, and how to occupy Nankado to solve his own problems. However, the Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa's order made him see an opportunity. Chapter 1124. Even if they didn't have a big appetite and couldn't swallow the Japanese Naval Division, they could at least chase them away and occupy the whole of Nankado. After Yang Chendong thought about it again and again, he sent a telegram to give the messenger from the Japanese army a chance to escape and send the information to Kuroda. Under Yang Chendong's arrangement, the messenger successfully escaped and smoothly entered Nankado. At this time, Kuroda had already received the order from the Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa through a carrier pigeon. At this moment, he was thinking of a plan of action. The messenger's appearance let Kuroda know that the five-star army already knew about the plan. In a fit of anger, he directly killed the messenger. After all, the biggest advantage of an army's action was the suddenness. But now that it was gone, how could he not be angry? Of course, this was all done by the Supreme General. He only did it for double insurance. After killing the messenger to vent his anger, Kuroda had to consider the matter of breaking out of the encirclement. Although he knew that the five-star army was already prepared, the Supreme General's order couldn't be disobeyed. The most important thing was that he didn't know what kind of problems would arise if he was trapped for a long time. 5 days later, Kuroda, who had prepared everything, gave the order to break out of the encirclement. 300,000 soldiers boarded 1,000 warships carrying provisions, supplies, and silver. They suddenly left Nankado and headed towards the sea. The ones responsible for stopping them were the elite High 4 Division and High 5 Division of the Five-Star Army. In addition, there were 30,000 soldiers from the Korean Navy. In total there were less than 50,000 soldiers. Facing the 300,000 Japanese army, even if they were prepared and had the advantage of artillery, they still couldn't stop them all. In the end, after 3 days and 3 nights of battle, only half of the Japanese army's forces were left behind and escaped. After that, the 2 division commanders sent a telegram to Yang Chendong to ask for forgiveness. However, Yang Chendong, who had already expected this result, didn't blame them. Instead, he rewarded them and gave the order to continue the chase. He wanted to use the speed and weapons advantage of the warships to continue attacking. In the end, he wanted to achieve the goal of blowing the Japanese Naval Division out of the Japanese Empire. The battle on the sea continued, and the 2 sides on land also fought back and forth many times. The Japanese army's morale was already broken, and the people's morale was already broken. The situation had already tilted a lot in the Five-Star Army's favor. If this continued, it was only a matter of time. The war in one nation began to move toward the final stage. The situation on the grassland became more and more serious. The Second Army's courtyard. This was the 3rd time Rong Xiao's appearance. The first 2 negotiations between the 2 sides did not go well, or it could be said that Xianxia was intentionally raising his status and delaying the negotiations. This time, Rong Xiao had already made the final decision. If they didn't surrender, they would fight. Too much time had passed, and he had already lost his patience. Or perhaps the people behind him had already lost their patience. In the end, Shaojing City and Jingzhou City only had the Five-Star Army. The 4 divisions added together only had a little more than 30,000 people. Beiming had already spent a lot of time and energy on them. For the higher-ups of Beiming, it would be best if they could recruit this new force. But if it really didn't work, they couldn't rule out the possibility of using force. It was precisely because the higher-ups were a little impatient that Rong Xiao's attitude was a lot stronger than the previous 2 times. After doing business for so many years, Rongxiao had developed the ability to speak with people and ghosts. His smiling face had always been harmless, but the words that came out of his mouth were very sharp. General Shi, I wonder what you've thought about it since it's been such a long time. You should know that Beiming has already stationed 200,000 soldiers outside of Shaojing City. We can attack whenever we want, and we have the ability to break through at any time. When he said this, the smile on the chubby Rongxiao's face had already disappeared. Instead, he looked like he was going to attack if Zhang Heng didn't give him an accurate answer. Facing the aggressive Rongxiao, Jia Bei knew that he did not have much time left. If he delayed any longer, it was very likely that things would go south. After thinking for a while, he said, "All right, I can agree to your proposal of a battlefield uprising, but please give me some time. You should know that although I am the commander of the new Second Army, other than Su Yuan, the other 3 division commanders were all arranged by Bugnam of Gojoseon. If I don't convince them, this matter won't work at all. You don't want to see a new Second Army that kills each other come to Beiming, right?" The reason given by Jia Bei was very appropriate. Rongxiao had also investigated the identities of the other 3 division commanders, and they were indeed arranged by Yang Chendong himself. These 20,000 cavalries were a very powerful force. If they were given up just like that, the matter would not be perfect, and Rongxiao's personal contribution would also be reduced. He immediately nodded and said, "All right, but I need an accurate time." 1 month. Jia Bei gave an answer after thinking about it for a while. "No, at most 10 days. Rongxiao refused in a businessman's tone. In the end, after bargaining between the two, 20 days was the norm. In other words, after 20 days, if Jia Bei still could not lead the new Second Army to Beiming, then the Beiming army outside the city would launch a military operation. First City. As the largest city under Xianxia's influence on the grassland, and also one of the earliest cities built, it was still prosperous. Although the external environment was a bit tense during this period, the people living in the city were not affected much. This naturally had an inseparable relationship with the powerful new army stationed here. As the highest leader of the military department other than Yang Chendong, Tiger's Mane fully showed enough ability to manage the new army in an orderly manner. Even the rampant Beiming Liaodong cavalry never had the intention to attack them. Even when they took action, they would often be 200 miles away from First City. It was also because of this arrangement that the two sides had the intention of not interfering with each other. But even so, Tiger's Mane did not mean to be proud at all. On the contrary, he was not in a good mood for a while. It was all because of the matters in Shaojing City and Jingzhou City. Rongxiao was indeed a qualified businessman. He knew how to maximize his benefits. Ever since he started to come into contact with the new Second Army, he kept releasing all kinds of unfavorable remarks. Just yesterday, a new piece of news came out, saying that it wouldn't be long before the heavily besieged new Second Army would fall into the arms of Northern Ming. When the news came out, Tiger's Mane naturally did not believe it. He did not even send a telegram to Yang Chendong. He knew that these things would naturally be handled by the intelligence department. What he had to do now was to deal with all kinds of accidents that might happen next. In the new army's military department in the city, Tiger's Mane invited the city lord, Yu Mian, and the logistics division commander, Yang Si, to sit down in a very quiet room. Yang Si, as the person in charge of logistics and with the lowest position, should be doing the work of pouring tea. While pouring tea for Tiger's Mane and Yu Mian, he did not stop talking. "The two of you, looking at your frowns, you don't really think that Commander Shi will defect to the enemy, right? Hee. Even if you don't believe him, you should believe in the young master's judgment." "Yes, I have also come into contact with this person, and I know him better. He probably won't betray the 6th young master." Yu Mian also agreed. "Probably." Tiger's Mane chuckled and shook his head. "Didn't you hear what the 6th young master said? There is no such thing as loyalty. It's just a matter of whether the bargaining chip for betrayal is enough. After all, this Shi Bei is not Han, nor is he our old brother. Now that he is heavily surrounded by the Beiming army, I wouldn't be surprised if he did anything to protect himself." After Tiger's Mane finished speaking, Yu Mian fell silent. Actually, from his words, it could be seen that he did not have much confidence in himself. What he said was just to unite everyone and not to casually suspect his colleagues. But now, even Tiger's Mane said that he was suspicious. Of course, it was not good for him to say anything. Xianxia, on the other hand, frowned after hearing this. He had already finished pouring tea and came down from the table. His right hand gripped a teacup tightly as he thought of something and said, "Since all of you are suspicious, why don't you report this to the young master? The young master must already know. It's just that he hasn't sent a letter yet. This is the part that we can't figure out," Tiger's Mane said as he shook his head. And after Xianxia heard this, he was stunned at first. He didn't know what to say next. If even the sixth young master could not confirm the authenticity of this matter, then this matter was probably more than 50% true. Xianxia fell into deep thought and did not speak. Yu Mian thought of something and said, "If that's the case, then we should also make preparations early. Once something really happens to the new second army, I'm afraid that the next target Beiming will deal with will be us." With the new second army stationed in Shaojing and Jingzhou City, this was equivalent to planting a stair on the grassland. Beiming had to be cautious if they wanted to make a big move. But once this constraint was gone, everything would be very different. They could concentrate all their energy on dealing with the first city and the new army. With their supplies cut off, the situation of the new army would only become more and more dangerous. "That's right, that's what I'm worried about. That's why I called you guys over to see if there's any good strategy." Tiger's Mane nodded heavily. Obviously, he had thought of all this. He called the two of them over to discuss this matter. After the matter was settled, the three of them gathered together to come up with a plan. At this moment, Yang Chendong, who was far away in the Japanese Empire, had indeed received a telegram from the intelligence personnel of the first city. It described some of the rumors they had heard in detail. However, because the two cities of Shaojing were heavily surrounded, they were unable to find out the specific and real situation. Therefore, they reported everything they heard regardless of whether it was true or false. Chapter 1125. Looking at the contents of the telegram in his hand, Yang Chendong's eyes flashed with a sharp light. In his heart, he had sentenced Rong Xiao to death. All along, Yang Chendong had a natural closeness to the Han people. Even though they were both merchants, the treatment of the Han merchants was much better. Whether it was the price of goods or the ratio, it was much higher than that of the foreign races. For this reason, many people had raised objections, but he had ignored them. It could be said that this policy had allowed many Han merchants to earn a lot of money, and Yang Chendong's reputation had always been very good. However, when the forest was big, there were all kinds of birds. There were still some people who were not satisfied. They even secretly went against Yang Chendong. Rong Xiao was a typical representative of this. Of course, without Rong Xiao, there would still be Wang Xiao and Li Xiao. However, who told him to run into the muzzle of the gun? If he did not punish this person, such things would inevitably happen again in the future. In order to achieve the effect of killing one to appease the 100, Rong Xiao had already been put on the death list. Putting Rong Xiao's matter aside, Yang Chendong needed to consider and judge the situation of the new second army that was surrounded and what the truth was. Even though before this telegram, Sherby had already sent a telegram and told him everything. However, when a general was outside, military orders could not be given. Who could guarantee that what Sherby said was true and not a ploy to stall for time and not just to brush him off? It was still the same saying. Loyalty depended on the bargaining chip. At least for now, Yang Chendong couldn't give up anything. Even if he could, before the crisis was resolved, it was just an illusion. It was just an empty check. Whether Sherby could be trusted or not was a problem that Yang Chendong had to consider. If he made a mistake in his judgment, everything that followed would be useless. Yang Chendong thought about the first time they met and how he had promoted the other party to a commander. He felt that he had done enough and was sincere enough. Feeling that he had not done anything wrong, Yang Chendong raised his eyebrows and said in his heart, "I have done what should be done. Next, let's bet that my judgment of people is not wrong. I hope you can withstand the test." Yang Chendong, who seemed to have made a decision in his heart, called Beta Persei. He wanted to send a telegram to Tiger's Mane of the new First Army to ask him to pay more attention to Sherby's situation. At the same time, he had to prepare for the city defense battle now. Although the new Second Army's matter was big, it was far away and there was nothing he could do. However, the problem of the Japanese army in front of him was something that needed to be solved. If he got stuck in this quagmire, he was afraid that it would not only be the new Second Army that would have problems, but more problems would appear. After seeing Beta Persei return after sending the telegram, Yang Chendong asked, "How's the situation in Nanhai province?" "Young master, the people who moved out are moving in, but the area there is not small. It will take at least a month to distribute the land and restore order," Beta Persei reported in a deep voice. "Okay." Yang Chendong nodded to show that he knew, and then asked, "Which army is responsible for the cleanup work?" "Young master, it's under the command of Commander Niu Duo." "Okay, order Niu Duo to take a boat to Ping and Beijing quickly. By the way, send a telegram to the Security Bureau in Baiming's Kyoto." When Yang Chendong said this, a murderous intent flashed in his eyes. Obviously, the matter of the new Second Army made him a little angry, and he was ready to start a massacre. Baiming's Imperial Palace. Acting sect master Zhu Qiyu was in a good mood recently. It was all because of the news that came from the grassland that Rong Xiao had already convinced the commander of the new Second Army of the Five-Star Army, Shi Biao. In 20 days, they might raise their army and surrender. If that was the case, he would not have to pay any price to gain an extra army of troops. Comparing the two, he would have a greater advantage in suppressing the Five-Star Army's forces. Once the Great Ming Empire suffered heavy losses and finally dealt with the Five-Star Army, he would lead a strong army to the south to solve the problem of the South Ming Empire. If he could also solve the problem of the South Ming Empire, then the Great Ming Empire would regain its former glory in his hands. Thinking about how great of a feat this would be, it was really exciting. Just as he was in a good mood, Chief Eunuch Jin Ing appeared. "Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's junior tutor Su Yozhen said that he has an urgent matter to discuss with you. What do you think?" "Oh, send him in." Hearing that Su Yozhen had come, Jin Ing nodded. He admired this official who could do things. Not long after, Su Yozhen appeared in the main hall of the Imperial Palace. He first knelt and kowtowed, and then he stood up with a serious expression. "Beloved official Su, you don't look too well. May I know why you've come?" Zhu Qiyu asked in a nonchalant manner. "Your Majesty, this official has come for a matter related to Baiming's reputation. I really have to say it." Seeing how solemn Su Yozhen was, Zhu Qiyu, who was sitting on the dragon throne, also straightened his body and asked, "What's the matter?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Su Yozhen held the ceremonial tablet and said, "Your Majesty, this official has come to ask for forgiveness." "What's going on?" Zhu Qiyu, who was confused by these words, asked. "Your Majesty, it's like this. Previously, when the Japanese Empire asked for help, this official spoke out in court to stop it. At that time, I didn't do anything wrong. After all, the most important thing in court right now is to solve the problem of the grasslands and achieve the goal of dealing a heavy blow to the Five-Star Army. But now, it seems that this official's vision was a bit short-sighted." Su Yozhen said with an apologetic attitude. "Why do you say that?" Zhu Qiyu was a bit stunned. He had already put the matter of the Japanese Empire's request for help to the back of his mind. He really didn't think that Su Yozhen would bring it up again. Su Yozhen was naturally instructed by Yang Chendong to come. Before he came, he had already thought of the words to say. He immediately said, "Your Majesty, this official has not thought things through." After a self-reflection he continued, "Ever since the Japanese Empire sent people to ask for help, there have been all kinds of rumors. But most of them are accusing us of not helping our vassal state. Especially the people from the Wara Empire stationed in the capital. They have mentioned this matter more than once in public. The Japanese Empire was a vassal state of the Great Ming Empire. Now that they were in danger, Baiming chose to not help them. Thinking about it, as the current Baiming's partner, how could Yes Hen of the Wara not have any thoughts? If this matter was not handled well, it would greatly affect the cooperation between the two sides. Su Yozhen used this as an excuse to speak out. It couldn't be more appropriate. After listening to this, Zhu Qiyu couldn't help but frown. Although Baiming was not as good as it used to be, and even the surrounding vassal states were almost devoured by the Five-Star Army, he had to consider the feelings of the other party. He didn't expect that the Japanese Empire's matter would attract the attention of Yang Chendong of the Wara. Now that they were cooperating, Zhu Qiyu, who didn't want to make things worse, immediately asked Su Yozhen, "Su Yozhen, if this is the case, do you have any ideas?" "Your Majesty, I have a plan that can shut the mouth of the Wara with the smallest price." Hearing that he was finally asked, Su Yozhen answered without hesitation. "Speak." Yes. I think we should send an army to the Japanese Empire to show that Beiming will not give up on our vassal states. As for this army, there doesn't need to be too many people. It's mainly for show. If there is any danger, then retreat immediately. That way, no one will be able to say anything. Which army? Zhu Qiyu asked with interest. Your Majesty, didn't you just set up a navy? There are only 50,000 people, which is neither more nor less. Let them go to the periphery of Neon and they can test the army. It's the best of both worlds. Su Yozhen replied with a smile on her face after she finally expressed her thoughts. Since the 5-star army has been growing, especially after they first took down North Korea and then attacked the Japanese Empire, the safety of the sea has also attracted Zhu Qiyu's attention. He spent a lot of money to build a 50,000-person navy, and at the same time lifted the ban on the sea. He was ready to build something on the sea. In Zhu Qiyu's opinion, even if they can't dominate the sea like the 5-star army, they should at least have the power to protect themselves and have their own voice. Therefore, this 50,000-person navy was established, and the people chosen were all people who were excellent in the water. It took a lot of effort. This 50,000-person navy can be called the prototype of the Beiming Navy. Once it is done, it will continue to grow. Therefore, when he heard that he was going to send this precious army to the battlefield of the Japanese Empire, Zhu Qiyu was a little against it. Su Yozhen saw that Zhu Qiyu didn't make a decision immediately, so she knew what the other party was thinking. She continued to say, Your Majesty, from a weak army to a strong army, it has to go through all kinds of training. This trip to the Japanese Empire is one of them. Besides, if things go wrong, we can withdraw in time. Just treat it as a training at sea. We can use this opportunity to shut the mouths of others. Isn't it a good thing? Zhu Qiyu thought about it carefully and felt that there was a certain degree of truth, so he nodded. Good, since that's the case, I will discuss it with the officials of the Ministry of War. Zhu Qiyu said this, which meant that he agreed. It was not the late period of the Great Ming Dynasty, and now the imperial power was still relatively unified. Especially in the use of the army, they had the power to keep their word. Sure City. Yang Chendong sent a telegram. There were not many words, and it could even be said that there was only one sentence. Observe closely, prepare to defend the city, and act at your discretion during special times. The so-called act at your discretion was equivalent to giving all the power to Tiger's Mane. This was a trust, but at the same time, it was also a pressure. Chapter 1126. It was conceivable that if the matter was not resolved properly, Tiger's Mane would inevitably be blamed by others. However, at this time, Tiger's Mane could no longer care so much because he had received accurate information that the Beiming emissary had begun to negotiate with them. They had agreed to make a final decision within 20 days at the latest. Now, it seemed that there were only 17 days left. It was naturally Rong Xiao who took the initiative to be able to obtain accurate information. He deliberately opened a hole in the siege and allowed a group of people from Jianghu City to walk out. As expected, there were intelligence personnel from the 5th Star Army among them. As soon as he received the news, Tiger's Mane called Yu Mian and Yang Si. The three of them discussed together how to deal with the complicated situation that could change at any time. The three of them first listened to the report of the intelligence personnel who had escaped from Jianghu City. When they learned that their people had seen the merchant Rong Xiao appear in the residence of the northern Ming emissary with their own eyes, and when they saw him being escorted out with a smile, the three of their faces turned somewhat ugly. The one who had the most intense reaction was Yang Si. He suddenly slammed the table and reprimanded loudly. What does this Beiming want to do? To think that the young master trusts him so much. He actually dares to collude with foreign enemies and rebel. This is really intolerable. That's right. I didn't expect him to be such a person. Yu Mian quickly agreed. At the same time, he also looked very angry. Tiger's Mane's expression was not much better, but he knew that this was not the key point now. Once the new Second Army really joined Beiming, then the first city would become the next target. With the supply completely cut off, how to deal with this complicated situation was what he needed to consider. As for other matters, regardless of whether it was true or not, the 6th young master would naturally deal with it. Both of you, calm down first. Let's think about our own problems first. Once the two cities of Shaojing and Jing province are obtained by Beiming, they will have nothing to worry about. The next step is to send troops to the beginning city. At that time, do the two of you have any countermeasures? Listening to Tiger's Mane's words, Xianxia replied without hesitation. What else is there to think about? Of course, we'll deal with whatever comes our way. Our beginning city is not like Shajing City and the other two cities. We're heavily guarded here, and we also have a united army and people. We're not afraid of any enemy's invasion. Yes, our beginning city is not afraid of any enemy. Let's just fight. Yu Mian's heroic spirit seemed to have been aroused at this moment. His voice was like a bell as he spoke. All right. This was what Tiger's Mane wanted. As long as everyone had the same attitude and cooperated with each other, there was nothing that couldn't be done. There was no enemy that couldn't be defeated. Just as the situation on the grassland became very complicated, the war on the battlefield of the Japanese Empire was in full swing. After Yang Chendong issued the order for a general counterattack, more than 200,000 soldiers of the Five-Star Army launched a crazy counterattack. In addition to the cooperation of more than 100,000 soldiers of Sensei Naganobu and Fukada Tani, their total strength had surpassed the troops of Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa. Having more troops than the other party did not mean that they would definitely win. However, the strength of the morale of the army and the strength of their combat power were enough to show that the scales of victory and defeat had tilted greatly. After the army left Ping and Beijing, they went straight to the north and came to the Dongshan Road. They separately conquered Jinjiang County, Mino County, Shindu County, and other places. They directly suppressed Ashikaga Yoshimasa's troops in the Musashi area of the Donghai Road. On the sea, President Kuroda's 300,000 soldiers broke through the encirclement. Although they had the advantage in terms of military strength, in the face of the powerful artillery of the C4th Division and the C5th Division, they fled all the way. When the 300,000 soldiers entered the Dongshan Road, there were only 100,000 soldiers left. On the land, they lost many cities and lost many soldiers. Of the 300,000 soldiers, there were only 100,000 left. Under such a situation, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who originally had millions of soldiers, only had 200,000 soldiers left. The reduction in his strength made him anxious every day. While he cursed the Five-Star Army for being arrogant, he also made preparations to abandon his homeland and leave the Japanese Empire. Compared to the Japanese Empire's continuous losses, the Five-Star Army was like an unstoppable hurricane. Wherever they went, they would not hesitate to kill anyone who resisted. Along the way, who knew how much blood they had shed? In the end, the forces that opposed the Five-Star Army were all in danger. Most of them had no choice but to surrender, while a small number of them fled. Based on the current situation, in at most 3 months, the entire Japanese Empire would be conquered by the Five-Star Army. After taking half a year to migrate and exchange people, it was inevitable that Japan would become another province under the Five-Star Army. However, at this time, a telegram suddenly appeared. At the same time, the 1st Cavalry Division, New Army, and the 4th Division were all transferred back to Ping and Beijing. When the telegram was sent out, all of the generals on the front lines who received the news were confused. Seeing that victory was right in front of them, they did not know why such an order would appear. Although the Five-Star Army had over 300,000 soldiers, the only ones that could fight were the 4th Division, the 7th Army, the 1st Cavalry Division, the New Army, and the 1st Reserve Division. The rest of the soldiers, such as the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th Divisions, as well as the hundreds of thousands of miscellaneous Japanese soldiers, were left behind to pick up the leftovers. Many of them were even cleaning up the battlefield. Now that 3 powerful armies were suddenly transferred away, it was inevitable that the generals would have all sorts of guesses. However, no matter what thoughts they had, this telegram was personally sent out by Yang Chendong. Just based on this point, no one dared to disobey. After being surprised for a moment, the 3 armies packed up and stopped moving forward. Then, within 8 hours, they began to change direction, going from north to south to Ping and Beijing. This was the military order of the Five-Star Army. Once an order was given, regardless of the situation, it must be obeyed. This was also something that Xianxia's generals had to do. In the blink of an eye, the 3 powerful armies left. Although the total number of soldiers was not large, only around 50,000, it was still a big blow to the morale of the army. The 7th Army's commander, Tian Su, took the initiative to look for the 1st Reserve Division's commander. Sukade was also a division commander, and the 1st Reserve Division soldiers were 30,000, far more than the 7th Army's 10,000 soldiers. However, Su Kuda gave Tiansu enough respect. After all, he was a member of the Cold Front series, fully equipped with firearms. "Commander Tian, please have a seat." In the face of Tiansu's visit, Su Kuda did not dare to be negligent and took the initiative to walk out of the tent to welcome him. "Commander Su is too polite." Tiansu had a smile on his face. He was very satisfied with Su Kuda's attitude. Since Su Kuda was so polite, he naturally would not refuse. Instead, he took the initiative to slow down his pace, trying to keep up with Su Kuda's pace. Everyone else in the tent left. When only the two of them were left, the smiles on their faces involuntarily disappeared. 3 out of 5 powerful armies had left. The two of them felt an enormous pressure. If a problem appeared in their originally sure-win situation because of this, it would mean that the two of them were incompetent. This made them unusually nervous and cautious. They looked at each other. In the end, it was Tiansu who spoke first. "Commander Su, 3 out of 5 powerful armies have left. The pressure on our shoulders will be much greater." "Yes, but we are not afraid," Su Kuda said in a booming voice. "Our 1st Reserve Division has 30,000 soldiers. They are all veterans who have experienced life and death on the battlefield. Although they are not as elite as the Cold Front, we have courage and courage. We are not afraid of any opponent or enemy." "Well said," Tiansu said happily as he waved his fist in the air. "Soldiers should be like this. They should have the courage to press forward. Just like the 6th young master said, when enemies meet on a narrow path, the courageous will win. As long as we are willing to fight with our lives on the line, we can defeat even the heavens and the earth." "Ha ha ha, Commander Su's words are very much to my liking," Su Kuda laughed heartily. With a good start, the rest of the conversation became much easier. As the two of them continued to talk, they quickly reached a consensus on how to fight the next battle. One by one they came up with a military plan. As for Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was preparing to leave Musashi Prefecture, he was sighing in sorrow. He was sitting on a chair and sighing with grief. He really couldn't understand. This was clearly his home ground, and he had close to 1,000,000 soldiers. How could he be defeated by a mere 200,000 5-star soldiers? But now, the enemy's numbers were increasing as they fought. Why was he getting weaker and weaker? What was the reason for this? Was it simply because the enemy's weapons were too powerful? Even now, Ashikaga Yoshimasa still didn't know what it meant to win the hearts of the people. He thought that power was a high and mighty thing. As long as he grasped it tightly, he could do whatever he wanted. However, he did not know who gave him power. When a person with power did not use it to serve the people, he would not be far from death. Just as he was sighing, the sound of footsteps suddenly came from outside the tent. Then, a happy Maori regularization appeared and shouted, "Great General, good news, good news!" "Good news? What good news can there be at a time like this?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa said disapprovingly. In his opinion, the battle was already decided. He even had to leave his homeland. He really did not know what good news there was to be happy about. Maori regularization did not care so much. He took the report from the frontline scouts and stood in front of Ashikaga Yoshimasa. He said excitedly, "Great General, I just received news that the 5-star army has withdrawn." "What?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who originally did not care, suddenly stood up. His eyes were wide open, and he had a look of disbelief. "Say that again." Chapter 1127. Great General, the 5-star army has retreated. Maori regularization repeated. Retreated? Haha, have they all retreated? Ashikaga Yoshimasa's face flushed red with excitement. No. Maori regularization explained. The 5-star army has only retreated 50,000 soldiers. Originally, Ashikaga Yoshimasa thought that the 5-star army had completely retreated. Now that he heard that only 50,000 soldiers had left, which was less than a quarter of the army, he excitedly sat back down. Then he said with a dissatisfied tone, "Out of 200,000 soldiers, only 50,000 have left. Is there a need to be so happy? One must know that he only had 100,000 soldiers on land. Even if the other party retreated 50,000 soldiers, he still did not have the confidence to win. Maori regularization was startled for a moment. Then, he seemed to realize that he had said something wrong. He immediately took the initiative to explain, "Great General, although the five-star army has only retreated 50,000 soldiers, the ones who left are all elites. There is the 4th Division of the Cold Vanguard Army, the powerful 1st Cavalry Division, and the new army." When Ashikaga Yoshimasa calmed down and heard that it was these 3 divisions that had left, a hint of joy flashed across his face. However, he quickly regained his composure and said, "At this time, why did these 3 divisions suddenly leave? What is Bugnam of Gojoseon doing?" "I don't know." Maori regularization shook his head. How could he know about such a confidential matter? However, he knew that once these 3 divisions left, the pressure on the battlefield would be greatly reduced. When the opportunity was right, it was not impossible to turn defeat into victory. Although Ashikaga Yoshimasa was very curious about the whereabouts of these 3 divisions, he also knew that now was not the time to ask about it. Since the 5-star army's strength was greatly reduced, he had to consider another matter, which was to turn the situation around. "Very good. The 5-star army has suddenly retreated. This is an opportunity for us." "Humph, do you really think that we are easy to bully? You actually dare to look down on this great general. At this crucial time, you actually retreated instead of increasing the number of soldiers. Good, good. Then let's show you who's the boss. Mao Li-jun, take out the map." At this moment, Ashikaga Yoshimasa's face once again showed his usual domineering expression. He wanted to seize this opportunity to turn the situation around and win the war. If possible, he was afraid that he would even take back everything that he had lost. It was not impossible. After the two of them discussed for a while, they finally decided to counterattack and set their target on the Japanese army of the same race. That was the 120,000 Japanese army led by Sensei Naganobu and Fukada Tani. The originally declining Mashikaga Yoshimasa family was just struggling at death's door. Once Ashikaga Yoshimasa took over the military power, the Mashikaga Yoshimasa would not be able to do anything. It would not be long before the Mashikaga Yoshimasa took over some of the families and local forces. It would not be impossible for them to be completely wiped out. However, at this time the 5-star army appeared, and the war between the Japanese Empire began. The smart and insightful Sensei Naganobu took this opportunity to rise up and finally became the general trend. Now, not only did the Mashikaga Yoshimasa family regain their glory, but the number of soldiers under his command had also reached 80,000. If it was during peacetime, having such an army would be enough to make one a famous general. Even the Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa would not dare to underestimate him. All of this was thanks to Yang Chendong. Especially after seeing the strength of the 5-star army and the advanced weapons, Sensei Naganobu was even more impressed. At the same time, he was prepared to follow Yang Chendong to conquer the world and make contributions. Just like what he usually said when chatting with the other generals of the 5-star army, he only had his eyes on the Japanese Empire. In the end, he was still too short-sighted. He wholeheartedly followed Yang Chendong and waited for the Japanese Empire's war to end. He wanted to see if there was an opportunity to enter Yang Chendong's eyes and then go on a campaign. Suddenly, the situation changed. The 5-star army suddenly withdrew, and 3 strong armies left. This move really caught Sensei Naganobu off guard. Although he did not know where the 5-star army went, he knew that since Yang Chendong gave the order, it must be carried out. However, when his gaze returned to the battlefield, he could not help but worry about his own situation. Ashikaga Yoshimasa was able to be the supreme general of the Japanese Empire for so many years, and even completely take over the imperial power. It was not only because of luck, but also because this person was very capable. Now that such a big hole had appeared on his side, he did not believe that the other party did not notice and would not take any measures. And without the 3 strong armies, would the 5-star army still be able to win against the supreme general with an overwhelming advantage? Sensei Naganobu muttered in his heart. And there was another person who had the same thought, Fukada Tani. Unlike Sensei Naganobu, who took the initiative to join the 5-star army, Fukada Tani was forced to do so by the situation. Before this, he had fought with the 5-star army. Although he lost, he still gave the order to kill the people of the 5-star army. So, even though he was also a general of the Japanese army, compared to the other party, his situation was not just a little bit worse. Originally, he thought that as long as he performed well, and Ashikaga Yoshimasa was destroyed, Bugnam of Gojoseon would be in a good mood, and no one would look into his mistakes. But he did not think that the five-star army would withdraw 50,000 of their main forces, which made the originally certain victory situation become delicate again. It was now impossible to determine who would win and who would lose. This made Fukada Tani, who was originally nervous, feel a great sense of helplessness. And it was at this time that an old friend suddenly came to the military camp, an old friend that he did not expect. This person was dressed as an ordinary Japanese army soldier. When he suddenly appeared in Fukada Tani's tent, he was really shocked. Maori regularization. Why are you here? That's right, the person who came was Maori regularization, the general that Ashikaga Yoshimasa relied on the most. The reason why Maori regularization was able to come here was because of the discussion between him and the general. The two of them wanted to launch a counterattack when the five-star army's main forces withdrew. But considering that they did not have the advantage in terms of military strength, they decided to start with the five-star army. If they could find some spies and turn some generals to their own side, the military strength of both sides would have a fundamental change. At that time, winning the battle would not be impossible. After careful consideration, the two of them decided to target Fukada Tani. Although Fukada Tani's rebellion had caused the general to lose a lot of strength. But in this world, there were no eternal enemies, only eternal benefits. In order to achieve his goal, Ashikaga Yoshimasa decided to forgive Fukada Tani and give him a chance. Now that the target was decided, the general had to consider how to proceed. When Maori Masori took the initiative to stand up and express his willingness to accept and complete this mission, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was somewhat unwilling. This was the general that he relied on the most. If something were to happen to him, the loss would be too great. Ashikaga Yoshimasa did not immediately agree, which made Maori regularization feel very touched. Didn't this mean that the other party valued and cared about him? Because of this, he had to do this task well, so he said, "General, this mission has to be done by me. First of all, my identity is important enough. Only if I go can I dispel some of Fukada Tani's concerns and worries. Second of all, if something were to happen, it would be better for me to die than for the general to be in danger. So please agree to my request." It had to be said that Maori regularization's reason was very reasonable. With his status, it was indeed possible for him to prove his side's sincerity. And if Fukada Tani really did not want to betray the five-star army, taking down Maori regularization would indeed be a great achievement. The only thing that was worrying was that the risk was too high. However, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was a ruthless person after all. In his eyes, power was always the most important thing. Even if Maori regularization was loyal to him, he was just a subordinate that he could use. Since the other party was willing to take the risk and could bring him great benefits, he really had no reason to refuse. "Well, since that's the case, Mao Li-jun, I'll leave everything to you." After saying this, Ashikaga Yoshimasa bowed solemnly to Maori regularization. Maori regularization hurriedly dodged, then said with a touched face, "General, with your words, even if I lose my life to Fukada Tani, so what?" Just like this, Maori regularization appeared in Fukada Tani's tent. Along the way, he had brought enough money. After a while of bribing, he finally appeared in front of Fukada Tani without attracting anyone's attention. Fukada Tani was very surprised by Maori regularization's sudden appearance. But after all, he was someone who had made a name for himself before. He quickly suppressed this shock in his heart. First, he looked outside the tent and found that everything was normal. When he saw that his personal guards were patrolling not too far away, he felt more confident. He said to Mao Li-Xianxia, "Mao Li-jun, I have to say that your courage is not small. You actually dared to appear here alone. Don't you know that as long as I shout, someone will quickly rush in and take your life? At that time, if I hand you over to the five-star army, it will definitely be a great achievement." Facing Fukada Tani's threat, Maori regularization first smiled, then lifted his robe and looked at Fukada Tani, who was a little nervous because of his actions, and said, "Kuin Fukada, as you can see, I didn't bring any weapons, so I can't pose any threat to you. So I still have a few words to say to you. If you still want to take me down after hearing them, then I have nothing to say. No threat at all." Fukada Tani let out a long sigh of relief, and his expression returned to normal. "Hee hee, Mao Li-jun, you're quite brave. Good. With your boldness, this general will listen to what you have to say. Chapter 1128. At this moment, Fukada Tani was a little relaxed, and even a little happy. Especially when he saw Maori regularization, who used to order him around, lower his head. His mood was very good. Because he was happy, a smile unconsciously appeared on his face, and all of this fell into Maori regularization's eyes, which made him unable to help but have a trace of hatred in his heart. He was not a person who would not lower his head. Just like when he faced General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, he often lowered his head. But to a villain like Fukada Tani, he was too unwilling. If it were not for the sake of this big plan, he would not have done this. And even if he did this, he secretly swore in his heart that once the plan succeeded, it would be the time for him to take Fukada Tani's life. Maori regularization thought with hatred in his heart, but on the surface, he lowered his head and said, "Kun Fukada, this time I came here under the orders of the general. Please, for the sake of national justice, help the Japanese Empire fight back against the Five-Star Army. No matter what, the Japanese Empire should be our Japanese Empire, and we should not let outsiders touch it. Otherwise, our future generations will curse us for the rest of their lives." Maori regularization still wanted to talk, but Fukada Tani said impatiently, "Japanese Empire is your Japanese Empire, not ours, right?" What kind of person was Ashikaga Yoshimasa, and how much he thirsted for power, as a former subordinate, Fukada Tani knew very well, so there was naturally no problem with this question. "Fukada-kun, please wait for a moment. Let me finish my words." No one would be happy to have their words interrupted. If it were not for the situation, Maori regularization would have reprimanded him. "Humph." Fukada Tani snorted and turned his head to the side to express his dissatisfaction, but he didn't say anything else. Then, he continued to listen to Maori regularization. "Kun Fukada, you asked a good question just now. I will answer this question now. In the future, the Japanese Empire will be our Japanese Empire. Regarding this matter, the Supreme General has already made a decision. Once he becomes the Emperor in the future, he will make you the Supreme General. You will be in charge of the military affairs of the entire Japanese Empire. Oh, that's right. Here's a letter written by the General himself. You can take a look." As he spoke, Mao Lijiang handed over a prepared letter. In order to show his respect, he even extended both of his hands to pass it over. Initially, Xianxia had a nonchalant and joking expression on his face. However, when he heard that he would be appointed as the great general, his expression suddenly froze. Then he sat up straighter. Did the great general really say that? Of course. How could it be fake when it's written? If the Supreme General can't do it, Kun Fukada can take out this letter and announce it to the world. The Maori regularization's tone was extremely firm. With the letter in hand, Fukada Tani opened it and read it carefully. When he found that what was written was exactly the same as what the Maori regularization said, his expression became more excited. All of this fell into the eyes of the Maori regularization. After he sneered in his heart, he continued to add, "That's right. In order to express his sincerity and thank Kun Fukada for being so righteous, the Supreme General specially asked me to bring 500,000 taels of silver for you." Then, 500,000 taels of silver was sent to Fukada Tani. With power and money, no one would be able to resist such benefits. In addition, the Maori regularization continued to say, "Kun Fukada, if this matter is successful, you will be the savior of the Japanese Empire. People will remember you for generations to come. This is an incomparably glorious matter." Yes. Fukada Tani's face changed from a joking expression to one of surprise. He was smiling from ear to ear. At this moment, he really wanted to laugh 3 times to express his current feelings. But when he saw the Maori regularization standing in front of him very carefully, he suddenly came to a realization. His expression became very serious, and he said very seriously, "I have seen the Supreme General's sincerity. He is right. The matters of the Japanese Empire should be solved within the Japanese Empire. How can we let outsiders benefit? Since that is the case, I am willing to raise my troops to help the Supreme General." His words were dignified and even had a sense of justice. But both of them knew that this was just an excuse. Sure enough, money can solve everything. Seeing Fukada Tani's current performance, The Maori regularization laughed. Then, Fukada Tani's laughter also sounded. 8 hours later, when the sky was completely dark, the Maori regularization left. He brought Fukada Tani's promise and the plan that the two of them had discussed together. This was a good counterattack that Ashikaga Yoshimasa and the Maori regularization had thought of. They wanted to instigate Fukada Tani to rebel, and then make the center blossom. When the time came, they could suddenly send troops when the 5-star army was in chaos. This way, they would be able to win this war with the momentum of the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. It had to be said that this idea was somewhat risky, but fortunately, they succeeded. Ashikaga Yoshimasa saw the Maori regularization again. After listening to his report, he couldn't help but slap his thigh in joy and say the word, "good," 3 times. Good, that's great. Mao Lijun, did you discuss to launch a counterattack in 2 days? Yes, everything has been discussed. When the time comes, Fukada Tani will naturally make a move on Sensei Naganabu. Then, he will burn the provisions of the 5-star army. We will take advantage of this and attack. The Maori regularization said excitedly. Haha, very good. When the time comes, the position of Supreme General will naturally belong to Mao Lijun. As for that Fukada Tani, you should know what to do. Ashikaga Yoshimasa looked at the Maori regularization with satisfaction and said. A murderous look flashed in the eyes of the Maori regularization, and he immediately replied, Please rest assured, Supreme General, your subordinate naturally knows what to do. First take the letter, then kill. It will be very clean. Ha ha ha, that's great. Ashikaga Yoshimasa's laughter once again resounded in the tent. Because the 5-star army's 3 strong armies had suddenly retreated from the battlefield, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was originally prepared to withdraw from the Japanese Empire, made a new decision. He wanted to shed blood. He wanted to win back everything that he had lost. Regarding this, the 5-star army on the other side didn't know about this. They still continued to do as they pleased, slowly pushing forward the battle line, slowly moving towards Musashi Prefecture. In the next 2 days, under the careful supervision of the 2 commanders, Tense and Kushueda, they took down another outlying county of Musashi Prefecture. They were one step closer to success. After a day of hurrying, the soldiers were a little tired. In the evening, they started to cook early. Other than the necessary sentries, the rest of the main forces went to sleep. They needed to accumulate enough strength for the next day. Compared to the silence of the 5-star army's camp, 10 li in front of them, 100,000 Japanese army was slowly approaching. The one leading the Japanese Empire's Supreme General, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, and his deputy, Maori regularization. This time, all of the 100,000 soldiers were brought out. Clearly, they were prepared to go all out. This might be their last chance. If they won, they would rise again. If they lost, they would retreat. The 2 of them walked in the middle of the group. Their expressions were incomparably solemn. Before they saw the final result, their hearts were hanging high. The agreed time was getting closer and closer. The 2 of them were like defendants waiting to be judged by the judge. Their breathing became a lot heavier. Time passed by minute. Finally, the time that was supposed to come came. When it was midnight, the sound of battle cries could be heard from the distance. Then, flames soared into the sky, illuminating the horizon and turning it red. Haha, they finally made their move. Pass down my order, all troops attack. Supreme General, Ashikaga Yoshimasa, looked at the scene in front of him. Naturally, he was very excited. After a loud shout, the 100,000 Japanese Empire in front and behind him increased their speed and rushed straight ahead. At this time, the 5-star army's camp was in a mess. Corpses covered the ground. The smell of blood rushed to the nose and throat. There were military tents that were still burning. Fukada Tani, who was in full armor, was riding majestically on a tall horse and commanding the army. This time, he suddenly launched a night attack and caught Sensei Naganabu off guard. He killed thousands of people and captured countless people. He perfectly completed the mission given to him by the Supreme General. If there was a flaw, it would be that Sensei Naganabu used the chaos and the night to escape. But it didn't matter. He was just a stray dog. Fukada Tani didn't care about him at all. At this moment, he seemed to see the position of Supreme General getting closer and closer. It was almost within his reach. When Ashikaga Yoshimasa arrived with the army, he saw this scene. Seeing that the Supreme General had arrived, Xianxia put away the smile on his face and stepped forward to report the results of the battle excitedly. His saliva was really scattered all over the sky. At this moment, even if Ashikaga Yoshimasa didn't like Fukada Tani, he had to admit that the other party still had some charm and ability. At least, he completed the mission very well. So after listening to everything, he patted Fukada Tani's shoulder and said, "Very good, the next Supreme General is you. Now, we have to follow up the victory and completely defeat the 5-star army. We have to take back everything that originally belonged to us." "Yes. I am willing to be the vanguard and contribute to the new Japanese empire." As if he was infected, Fukada Tani once again took the initiative to ask for the order. "Good. Then I will have to trouble Kun Fukada." Ashikaga Yoshimasa nodded with satisfaction. Someone was willing to take the initiative to be the vanguard. That was really something to be happy about. Fukada Valley left, and he personally led his army of 50,000 to pursue the enemy. Behind him was Mori Masanori, who was also leading an army of 50,000. At the very back was Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, who was leading an army of 50,000. Chapter 1129. A total of 150,000 soldiers charged forward like a long dragon, chasing after the 5-star army. It could be said that they were invincible. They did not even need Maori regularization to do anything as they continued to advance. Along the way, they could see the corpses of the 5-star army soldiers lying on the ground. Unfortunately, most of them were from the Japanese Empire. Although Maori regularization could not bear to see them die, he knew that these people had betrayed them and deserved to die. After thinking about killing all of the Sensei Naganobu's men, it should be the Han people next. He could not help but become excited. The night passed by as they chased each other. By the time the next day dawned, they had already traveled 30 to 40 kilometers. When the sun rose and shone on their bodies, they felt a warm feeling. Fatigue also surged through their bodies. Reporting to General, the scouts at the front have sent news that General Fukada Tani's army has disappeared. Just as Mao Li was lazily stretching his back on his horse, a personal guard walked over and said something that made him turn pale with fright. Disappeared? Could it be that they ran too fast and lost track of them? Maori regularization felt that something was wrong, but he did not think of the worst possibility. "We didn't lose them, but they deliberately hid. General, we are surrounded by tall mountains. If someone wants to hide, it won't be easy to find them." The bodyguard didn't dare to speak nonsense without evidence, but he still had the ability to remind the general. They deliberately hid? How is that possible? Mao Li-zhang still had a look of disbelief on his face, but soon his eyes widened. Clearly, he had thought of a possibility. He suddenly shouted, pass down the order, stop advancing and retreat immediately." If Fukada Tani deliberately disappeared, then there was a big problem. The worst and most likely result was that he did not intend to help the general at all. On the contrary, he did all this to lure them into a trap. Maori regularization came to a realization, but it was too late. Because just as he ordered the army to stop, and before the order had even reached the ears of the 50,000 soldiers, deafening battle cries suddenly came from the surrounding mountains. Then, countless bright-colored 5-star army soldiers covered the sky and covered the earth. It was as if a large blanket was about to wrap them up completely. When the battle cries sounded, Maori regularization's expression became very bad. He did not think that the worst result would happen. Speaking of his previous impression of Fukada Tani, whether it was Maori regularization or Supreme General Ashikaga Yoshimasa, they did not completely trust him. According to the previous plan, they would only attack when the 5-star army was defeated. But the strange thing was that the beginning of the battle was too smooth. Fukada Tani actually burned down the granary, and there were so many Japanese army corpses on the ground. Maori regularization also carefully looked at the corpses and found that the people on the ground had indeed died not long ago. It was all of this that dispelled all of Maori regularization's worries. Now that he thought about it, he was still too anxious. Even if Fukada Tani really fought with them against the 5-star army, with his strength, how could he do all of this so easily? It was completely because he was forced too hard. Now that he finally saw the light of hope, he threw himself into it without caring about anything else. There's no need to retreat. Tell everyone to shrink the formation and resist as much as possible. As long as we can hold on for a while, the Supreme General will definitely send troops to save us. Maori regularization was worthy of being a commander for many years. When he saw the qualitative change in the situation, he immediately changed the battlefield strategy. However, facing the 5-star army that had been prepared for a long time, even if Maori regularization's orders were accurate, once they reached here, everything would be over. 5 foreign divisions, plus more than 100,000 Japanese army led by Fukada Tani and Sensei Naganabu, a total of more than 200,000 people. And this was after they were prepared to deal with only 50,000 Maori regularization. There was no suspense at all about the result. The fierce battle began. Countless soldiers of the 5-star army rushed towards the Japanese army that was surrounded. The sound of swords clashing could be heard endlessly. Under the great momentum, after resisting for less than an hour, the Japanese army's defensive formation began to show various loopholes. Gradually, the Japanese army began to surrender and kneel on the ground. The outcome of the battle was about to be decided. Not far from the center of the battlefield, Sensei Naganabu looked at Fukada Tani, who was also riding a tall horse, with a trace of envy and said, "Kuin Fukada, this time you have made a great contribution. Bugnam of Gojoseon will definitely record it down." "Ha ha ha, Meiji Kuin, I'll take your blessings. In fact, Bugnam of Gojoseon has already promised me the benefits I need. I'm very satisfied." When Fukada Tani said this, there was an unconcealable excitement on his face. Yes, the reason why the Maori regularization was surrounded was all because of Fukada Tani's betrayal. Ever since the Maori regularization appeared in front of him and spoke sincerely, Fukada Tani was not moved at all. However, he still pretended to accept everything in order to make a great contribution. Just like when the Maori regularization left, Fukada Tani went to find the 7th Army's commander, Tion Su, and the 1st Reserve Division's commander, Su Kuda, and told them everything that had just happened. Fukada Tani's IQ was not low at all. He was chosen by Ashikaga Yoshimasa to stay in Ping and Beijing. He clearly understood the situation. The so-called Supreme General of the Japanese Empire was nothing more than a grasshopper after autumn. He would not be able to jump around for more than a few days. Not to mention, with what he had done, it would be strange if Ashikaga Yoshimasa would forgive him. The position of Supreme General? Only a fool would believe it so easily. Cooperating with such a person was simply courting death. Take advantage of your weakness to take your life. At this juncture, the most important thing was to find a way to step on him and maximize the benefits. In order to ensure that his rights and interests were not lost, Fukada Tani took the initiative to find Tion Su and Su Kuda to report his work. From this point alone, it could be seen that he was very cautious. It was as if he was afraid that if he only went to find one of the commanders, the matter would be leaked and he would lose the credit. Fukada Tani underestimated Tion Su and Su Kuda. The former was the commander of Lang Fong Lu and had a limitless future. The latter was the commander of the 1st Reserve Division, and was in charge of 30,000 veterans. His future was also unpredictable. How could these two people steal Fukada Tani's credit? Therefore, this news was quickly sent to Yang Chendong in Ping and Beijing in the form of a telegram. Not long after, a telegram came back. First, he praised Fukada Tani's loyalty. Then, he stated that the 500,000 taels of benefits given by Ashikaga Yoshimasa were all for Fukada Tani's personal use. Not only that, once the Japanese Empire became a province of Xianxia, if he wanted, he could stay in the Japanese Empire and become a true Supreme General. This was Yang Chendong's breadth of mind. His vision had never been limited to a city or a place. His goal was the entire world. A small Japanese empire was nothing to him. Not to mention, when the Japanese Empire became a province in the future, it was necessary to have a local Supreme General. Only then could they avoid more internal friction. Fukada Tani's ability to lead troops into battle was average, but he was smart enough to see the situation clearly. Yang Chendong was very relieved to have someone like him manage the military of the Japanese Empire in the future. After Tion Su and Su Kuda read the telegram, it was sent to Fukada Tani. He was extremely excited and repeatedly said that he would fully cooperate with the 5-star Army's military operation and fight a beautiful battle for the world to see. Tion Su and Su Kuda, who originally wanted to show off and prove themselves, would not let go of such an opportunity. After the three of them discussed, they came up with a military plan to lure the enemy in and surround them to destroy them. Everything was going smoothly. The Maori regularization was surrounded by more than 4 times the number of soldiers, completely cutting off any thoughts of escape. At this moment, Fukada Tani's face was full of smiles and joy. The surrounded Maori regularization was still struggling to lead his troops. From time to time, he would anxiously look behind him. He was waiting for the arrival of the Supreme General. With 50,000 reinforcements arriving, the gap in strength would be reduced. They would still have the strength to fight. At the very least, their chances of breaking out of the encirclement would be much higher. Unfortunately, the Maori regularization was destined not to be able to wait for reinforcements. At this moment, Ashikaga Yoshimasa was not feeling good either. He, who was following behind, had also fallen into the trap of the 5-star army. At this moment, he was surrounded by 30,000 veterans of the 1st Reserve Division and the 7th Army, who were all armed with firearms. At daybreak, such a scene appeared in front of him. While Ashikaga Yoshimasa was shocked, he also felt a sense of powerlessness. He did not expect the situation in front of him to be like this. There were still too many questions that he did not understand. Taking advantage of the fact that the two sides were only surrounding each other and had not yet engaged in battle, Ashikaga Yoshimasa took the initiative to ride to the front of the army. He asked the 2 division commanders, Tiansu and Su Kuda, who were opposite him, "The 2 of you, I admit defeat this time. Before I fight to the death, there is one thing that I would like to clarify. Seeing that I may die, please tell me the answer. Don't let me be a confused ghost, okay?" Ashikaga Yoshimasa lowered his noble head just to ask a question. As the soon-to-be victors, Tiansu and Su Kude, of course, would fulfill his request. Tiansu took the initiative to say, "Okay, as long as your question does not involve any military secrets, we can consider telling you the answer." "Thank you." Imitating the Han people, Ashikaga Yoshimasa clasped his fist and bowed again. Then he raised his head and asked, "Last night, your camp was ablaze. That should be the rations being burned, right? Also, there were so many corpses on the ground. I saw that they were indeed people who died not long ago. I want to ask, what is going on?" Chapter 1130. If it weren't for the existence of these 2 facts, with Ashikaga Yoshimasa's suspicious personality, why would he take the initiative to chase after them? If that was the case, they wouldn't be trapped now. These 2 questions were really puzzling, but they didn't involve any military secrets. After Tiansu and Su Ku exchanged glances, Tiansu laughed and said, "Okay, then we'll fulfill your wish and let you be a ghost who understands everything. To tell you the truth, the provisions were indeed burned, but it's just moldy food. It can only emit the smell, but it can't be eaten. As for the corpses of the dead Japanese army soldiers, it's even easier to explain. During this period of time, there were many people in your country who opposed our 5-star army. They took the opportunity to burn, kill and loot, and did all kinds of evil. Because of this, many of them were captured. I just didn't expect them to play such a role before they died, but thinking about it, it's worth it." As soon as Tiansu's voice fell, Ashikaga Yoshimasa's face became very ugly. He didn't expect that those who died were actually his own people who opposed the 5-star army. Those who were supposed to support him were now mercilessly killed on the battlefield, and became bait for his own destruction. This scene was really unacceptable. Ashikaga Yoshimasa sat on the horse as if he was scared silly. Using this opportunity, the 5-star army launched a general attack. Ashikaga Yoshimasa, whose will was affected, no longer had the energy to command the army. Coupled with the all-out assault of the 7th Army, the battle became one-sided from the beginning. Just before the sky turned dark, the main force of the Japanese army who lost the will to resist was destroyed, and most of them were captured. Among them, Ashikaga Yoshimasa and Maori regularization died in the battle. Even before they died, their final plan to escape from the Japanese Empire was not realized. The news of General Ashikaga Yoshimasa's death on the battlefield was spread by some deserters. The Japanese Naval Division General Kuroda Naganori, who was preparing to meet him in Chonglu Prefecture, quickly left on a ship, taking 100,000 Japanese Army-Navy Division and disappeared into the vast sea. Even if the 5-star Army-Navy Division and Navy Division went all out to chase after him, they still couldn't find him. When the news was passed back to Yang Chendong, although there was a trace of regret, he still gave the order to stop the chase. For the sake of a stray dog who escaped, sending 2 elite navy divisions to chase after him was meaningless. With the escape of Kuroda, the general situation of the Japanese Empire was already set. The next step was to encircle and annihilate some of the opposition forces in the remote areas and re-establish the political system. It was not the first time that Xianxia had occupied other forces, so he was already familiar with the way. In less than 5 days, Du Jin, who had come from Korea, arrived here. He was the governor of a province appointed by Yang Qindong. Judging from the time, he should have received the news a long time ago. At this point, the War of the Japanese Empire lasted 14 months from January 1458 to February 1459. The Japanese Empire became a part of Xianxia's territory and changed its name to Japan Province. The governor was Du Jin, and the general was Fukuda Tani. In order to maintain the stability and prosperity of Japan Province, not only did Xianxia open a lot of businesses here, but Yang Qindong also allowed 100,000 soldiers and 100,000 navy divisions to stay here. At the same time that Shaowei Province was established, many mines were being developed at the same time. According to Yang Qindong's memories from his previous life, many mines that would take many years to be discovered were being developed one by one, especially silver mines. It could be imagined that with so many silver mines being developed, it would be a great financial support for Xianxia's forces. Of course, these things were handed over to the new governor, Du Jin, to deal with. As Japan Province was established and gradually stabilized, Yang Qindong's eyes began to move to the west, which was Beiming and the grasslands. Before this, a piece of news first appeared in front of Yang Qindong. According to Su Yozhen, 50,000 Beiming navy divisions had arrived at Japan Province's South Sea Road. Because communication was blocked, these people didn't know that the Japanese Empire had been replaced by Xianxia's Japan Province. They're here to give you a gift. All right, accept it. After receiving the news, Yang Qindong laughed and gave the order. In reality, this wasn't a coincidence. It was something that Yang Qindong had planned for a long time. Even the 4th Army Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the new army had been mobilized from the battlefield to welcome these 50,000 Beiming Navy divisions. 50,000 Beiming Navy divisions weren't much, not to mention that they had just been established, so their fighting strength was mediocre. The reason why Yang Qindong attached so much importance to them was to attack Beiming Navy divisions and use this name to make a move against Beiming. Yes, Yang Qindong had already decided to go to war with Beiming. Since the other party wanted to attack the new Second Army, it would be impolite not to reciprocate. Of course, he had to return the favor. As for whether this battle would be a partial one or a full-scale one, it would depend on the development of the situation. Beiming Navy divisions naturally knew Yang Qindong's intentions, especially the Navy Division General Song Yong. At this moment, he was standing on a ship in high spirits, looking at the Japanese army soldiers and civilians who were lining the streets to welcome him. South Sea Road, Tosa Prefecture. This place was close to the coastline and was also the only way for various forces to enter this place. Now, in front of the largest dock here, there were tens of thousands of soldiers and civilians of the Japanese Empire. They were shouting the slogan of the Celestial Empire to welcome the guests from afar. Song Yong, who was leading a group of Beiming Navy divisions, had a full smile on his face. He was very happy in his heart. Everything in front of him made him very excited. After all, it would be strange if he wasn't in a good mood after receiving such a welcome. What made him the happiest was that on the way here, they had encountered the 5-star army at sea. At that time, he was very nervous. Everyone knew that the 5-star army's navy divisions were very powerful. Just when Song Yong was sweating cold sweat and was thinking about whether to return the fleet or not, the 5-star army's navy divisions suddenly retreated. It was as if they were afraid of them. The difference between heaven and earth made Song Yong a little confused, but he quickly remembered that he was representing Beiming. Even if the great Ming dynasty was divided into two, a starving camel was still bigger than a horse. It was still not something that anyone could spy on. It was precisely because of this experience that Song Yong was full of confidence in this operation. Even the powerful 5-star army's navy divisions didn't dare to be enemies with him. What else was there to be afraid of? As a result, his task this time should be very simple. Along the way, his mood became very happy. When he arrived at the island of the Japanese Empire, he saw the huge crowd here to welcome him. The trace of worry he had disappeared. Song Yong's mood was very good. With his hands behind his back, he walked forward steadily with a confident smile on his face. It gave people the feeling that as soon as they appeared here, they would be able to quickly solve the crisis here. After Song Yong got off the ship and received a warm welcome, more and more Beiming soldiers also got off the ship one after another. After drifting on the sea for so many days, anyone would feel a little uncomfortable. Now that they could walk on land, and they were so welcomed, it was a very wonderful thing. The person in charge of welcoming Song Yong was a Japanese army general called Okabe Uchiyama. It was said that he was a very important general under Ashikaga Yoshimasa. He was responsible for receiving Song Yong and his party. This Okabe Uchiyama, who was not very tall and even looked a little wretched, seemed to be very good at grasping people's hearts. He had a smile on his face that made people feel like they were bathing in spring. He accompanied Song Yong all the way to a small town not far from the dock. General Song, we thank the great Ming Empire for sending troops to support us. In order to express our gratitude, the great Ming Empire has prepared food and wine, as well as beautiful women. We will certainly not let General Song down. At the same time, Okabe Uchiyama took out 2 banknotes worth 100,000 silver from his arms like a magic trick and put them in Song Yong's hand when no one was looking. Song Yong's eyes only glanced at the banknotes. After seeing the amount on it, the originally very happy Song Yong's face became even redder. He didn't expect to have such a harvest. It was said that the Japanese Empire was a small country, poor and pitiful. He thought that coming here would be difficult, but now it seems that this was not the case. It has to be said that the great Ming Empire's people were prejudiced. Under the Confucian education, they seemed to be the only orthodox people in the world, and they were the most powerful. Because of this, they had a sense of superiority, but if they underestimated the great Ming Empire, it was only a matter of time before they suffered a big loss. Back to the topic, Song Yong held the banknotes in his arms and patted his chest in joy as he said to Okabe Uchiyama, "General Okabe, you can rest assured. With our Beiming Navy here, the 5-star army will not dare to act rashly. They are only the subjects of Bugnam of Gojoseon. How could they dare to become enemies with the Emperor of Beiming?" Good, with General Song's words, that's great. How about this, let's drink and eat first. In the words of the Han people, it's a welcoming dinner for everyone. After that, we'll go and rest. Hee, I've arranged a surprise for General Song in the room. As for the 5-star army, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Okabe Uchiyama's eyes were squinted, and he was smiling so much that his eyes almost disappeared. He was expressing his joy. Of course, Song Yong knew what an unexpected surprise was. He had just seen a lot of girls from the Japanese Empire in the crowd. They were all dressed up beautifully, and their eyes were like silk. Their faces were so soft that it seemed like water could be squeezed out of them. There were a lot of girls, and they had already attracted the attention of the Beiming Navy soldiers. Okabe Uchiyama had also intentionally mentioned the word beautiful, so how could he not know what it meant? Haha, good. Then I will have to trouble General Okabe. General Song is too polite. This is what we should do. You are here to help us. Okabe Uchiyama continued to laugh. Those girls were indeed from the Japanese Empire, but they were different from normal girls from the Japanese Empire. They were the family members of the great generals and the soldiers. Now that the great general was dead, as the family members and relatives, they naturally needed an explanation. In the end, after some consideration, Okabe Uchiyama gathered them together and started a sex business. Chapter 1131. Unlike the women in the brothel, they were only responsible for solving the personal problems of the soldiers. When the matter was reported to Yang Chendong, he hesitated for a while, but in the end, he did not refuse. On the contrary, he gave a name to these women, calling them comfort women. Speaking of which, this was naturally not tolerated by the great Ming dynasty, and even the thousands of years of Wuxia's Confucianism. However, when he thought of what happened in Nanjing in his previous life, and how many women in Wuxia were harmed by the Japanese Empire, he could not bear to do it. He took it as an interest. What Yang Chendong did not expect was that when the children of the sinners found out that they did not need to die, and only needed to serve the men, and if they performed well, they could even get money to help the sinners get out of trouble. Most of them did not object, and instead, they were excited that they could do something for their families. This was the nature of servility and lowliness. After hearing about this, Yang Chendong finally did not say anything. Even when the 8th madam found out about this, she did not say anything. First of all, these were the children of the sinners, and it would be unreasonable if they were not punished. Second of all, in the Japanese Empire, men were superior to women. Now that they had a chance to wash away all the shame, this kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Of course, Junko also asked Yang Chendong about this matter. She meant that the daughters of the sinners could do this, but the ordinary people did not need to do this. Otherwise, what would the men of the Japanese Empire do? Yang Chendong, who did not agree to this, quickly satisfied Junko's request. He stipulated that only the daughters of the sinners could enter the comfort women. If there was any coercion, no matter who was involved, no matter what level of authority was involved, they would all be severely punished. In this way, an independent group of women appeared, and the first task they received was to entertain the 50,000 Beiming soldiers who came from afar. They wanted to make them happy and satisfied, so that they would put down all their vigilance and work hard for the next plan. Under special arrangements, more and more women from the Japanese Empire were brought to the temporary barracks of the Beiming Navy outside the town. Because there were too many wolves and too little meat, it was said that there were some disputes when it was almost night time. Some soldiers even had internal strife and fights because of the lack of women. Of course, this was only a small matter, because in the middle of the night, something even bigger happened. Countless soldiers of the 5-star army suddenly appeared like divine soldiers descending from the heavens. With lightning speed, they took control of the 50,000 Beiming Navy soldiers. Many soldiers could not understand this sudden scene. Some of them put on their clothes and picked up their weapons to resist, but they were quickly suppressed. In the face of the 5-star army, who was many times stronger than them in terms of both numbers and combat power, and they were completely unprepared, they couldn't even withstand a single blow. The 50,000 Beiming Navy soldiers were all captured, and even the soldiers who stayed on the ships did not have the chance to escape. They were all wiped out by the 5-star army. The last one was Song Yong, who was enjoying the pleasure of a man in the town. When he was sleeping soundly with a woman from the Japanese Empire in each of his arms, the 5-star army suddenly rushed into his room and made him fall from heaven to hell. The naked Song Yong was pulled out of his bed with his butt naked. Song Yong didn't wake up until his body touched the ground and he felt the coldness of the neon soil in February. Then he shouted, "What are you doing? I am the general of the Beiming Navy, and I am here to help you. Are you trying to rebel?" Song Yong's shout was not soft, but no one cared. When he was dragged all the way to the main hall of the room, under the bright lights, he saw Yang Chendong sitting on the main seat. He was wearing a green robe, and his entire body was emitting an oppressive aura. Yang Chendong was not just a name, but a famous person. Although there was no photography at that time, there were many excellent artists. Yang Chendong's appearance had long been spread among the people. Song Yong was a general who commanded 50,000 soldiers, and this time, he was going to make things difficult for the 5-star army. How could he not recognize him? So when he saw Yang Chendong sitting on the main seat, his brain instantly short-circuited. He did not expect Yang Chendong to appear here. For a moment he reflexively said, "Bugnam of Gojoseon, why are you here? Shouldn't you be? Should be facing the siege of the Japanese army in Ping and Beijing." "Humph. Ignorant guy. Let me tell you, the Japanese Empire is gone. Before you could even set foot on this land, it had already been conquered by this king." Yang Chendong's voice carried a trace of ridicule. The dignified Beiming actually sent such a good-for-nothing general to deal with him. He did not know if he should say that the other party was ignorant or arrogant. Like a bolt from the blue, when these words entered Song Yong's ears, he was so shocked that he could not speak. The powerful Japanese Empire was actually defeated and conquered by the 5-star army. He wanted to say that this was impossible, but when he thought of Yang Chendong's previous actions, it seemed that it was not impossible. Especially now that he was surrounded by the 5-star army's generals and soldiers, and there was no Japanese army around. There were also no sounds of killing. This was enough to prove everything. Song Yong was not a general with a backbone. The only reason he was able to be in his current position was because he was smooth and slick. Now that he knew that the situation was not good for him, the only thing he could think of was to save himself. In front of so many 5-star army's generals, Song Yong knelt on the ground and crawled at Yang Chendong's feet. Under the light, his white butt was very dazzling. "Bugnam of Gojoseon, This general was wrong. I should not have come to be your enemy. But all of this was the emperor's will. This general did not dare to disobey. Don't worry, as long as you let me go back, I will definitely not be an enemy of the 5-star army. I am willing to swear. With snot and tears, Song Yong did not have the demeanor of a general at all. But right now, not only did his appearance not make people feel any pity or sympathy, it only made him receive countless disdain. In front of so many generals, if he had some backbone, even if he died, he would still receive everyone's respect. But kneeling and begging for mercy was the most cowardly display. Soldiers were cowardly, while generals were cowardly. It could be imagined that even the general leading the army was like this. It would be strange if they could train qualified and outstanding soldiers. Yang Chendong was also speechless at Song Yong's current appearance. He originally thought that the other party would appear and reprimand him. After all, from a righteous point of view, the other party had received the order of the Emperor of Beiming, while he was just a king. He had even planned to talk back to him, but he never thought that the other party would kneel on the ground and beg for mercy. This made him unable to say a lot of the words he had prepared. Of course, Song Yong's fear of death made it much easier for Yang Chendong to carry out the next military plan. First, he rolled his eyes at Song Yong, who was kneeling on the ground. Then, he turned his gaze to Yang Er, who was standing next to him. He then covered Song Yong with a sheet. Although the thin sheet couldn't play an absolute role in this cold weather, it could still cover his face. I'll leave the rest to you. Yang Chendong suddenly lost interest. A person who was so afraid of death, as long as he didn't take his life, he would not refuse to do anything he wanted him to do. After saying this to Beta Persei, Yang Chendong said to the commander of the 4th Army Division, Ling Daqiang, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Tian Hu, and the commander of the new army, Su He, who were waiting at the side. The 3 of you, go back and prepare. The army will set off tomorrow morning. Yes. The 3 generals who had always been arrogant, after hearing Yang Chendong's words, they all respectfully lowered their heads and answered. At the same time, the 3 of them were also very excited. After such a long time, could they finally compete with the Beiming army? After Yang Chendong left, Beta Persei did not leave with him. Instead, he appeared in front of Song Yong, who was kneeling on the ground, with a smile on his face. General Song, it's time for us to have a good talk, but I don't know if you're willing to cooperate. Don't worry, even if you don't cooperate, I won't kill you. Instead, I'll make you feel worse than death. Although Beta Persei had a smile on his face, Song Yong felt a chill and a sense of danger. He immediately said desperately, General, please rest assured that I will cooperate. As long as you don't kill me, I'll do anything. A few hours later, when the sky had just brightened, tens of thousands of the 5-star army boarded Beiming's ships and disappeared. In just one day, the docks in Tosa Prefecture regained its tranquility. If it was someone who did not know, they would not be able to imagine that this place would be so lively yesterday. Jianghu City. Tomorrow was the 20th day, which meant that he only had one night to delay. He had to make a decision whether to surrender or fight. Sitting in the study room, the candlelight reflected on his face. He had only been surrounded for a few months, but at this moment, he looked a lot paler than before. Mental exhaustion was the reason for all of this. Originally, he was just a Mongolian general, and he was even the kind of general who was not valued. In the past, even eating and dressing had been a problem. However, everything changed after meeting Yang Chendong. He was put in an important position and was treated better. Especially the trust he had in Yang Chendong made him feel like he was willing to die for his bosom friend. Especially after he became the commander of the new 2nd Army. He was ready to go all out. He wanted to let everyone know that the 6th young master did not misjudge him. He had such strength and most importantly, he had such loyalty. Chapter 1132. Everything was destroyed as the 2 cities of Shaojing and Jingzhou were besieged. At this moment, the fate of hundreds of thousands of people and tens of thousands of soldiers was in his own hands. Perhaps a wrong decision would cause everyone to lose their lives, or perhaps a wrong decision would allow everyone to continue living. The choice had made Shibi very anxious. He had sent telegrams to Yang Chendong more than once to express his worries. He had also asked him to lead the new 2nd Army to break out of the encirclement. In this way, the hundreds of thousands of people in the two cities might suffer. Under the heavy encirclement, he could not guarantee how many people in the new Second Army could escape. But at least he did not lower his head. He lived up to the trust Yang Chendong had in him. However, everything came to an abrupt end with a new telegram from Yang Chendong. It clearly said, "The changes in the situation often catch people off guard. But thinking back to the humiliation of Han Xin and the suffering of the King of You, it all proves that temporarily lowering your head and lying low is also a wise move. As for where to go, no matter what decision you make, I believe in you." It was a simple sentence. There was no deliberate guidance or command. It was a sentence that placed all the initiative in his hands. But the more it was like this, the more Shibi felt the weight of the responsibility. He could not make a decision for a long time. "Master," outside the door, Division Commander Kong Ji and Guard Captain Wu asked to see you. Just when Shibi was still struggling in his heart and could not make any decision, the voice of the butler sounded outside the door. Kong Ji, the division commander of the 1st Cavalry Division of the new Second Army, could be said to be second only to Shibi in the army. In other words, once something happened to Shibi, Kong Ji would be the temporary division commander of the new Second Army. This was also what Yang Chendong had said when he established the new Second Army. Wu Xiaoyi, Shibi's guard captain, was not only strong, but also loyal. It could be said that he was the last line of defense to ensure Shibi's safety. When something big happened, Shibi would discuss it with him. It could be seen that he was also a very important figure in the new Second Army. It was these two people who came together in the night. Even Shibi did not pay attention to them. "Please." Soon, the housekeeper brought the two of them into the study. Knowing that there was something important to discuss, the housekeeper took the initiative to leave and close the door. When there were only 3 people left in the room, the atmosphere could not help but become a little tense. Perhaps everyone knew that time was limited, so after a few moments of silence, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division took the initiative to ask, "Commander, tomorrow is the deadline given by Baiming. What's your decision?" Shibi didn't answer immediately. Instead she asked, "What do you two think?" At this moment, the atmosphere in the room became tense again. The 3 of them knew that every decision would affect the life and death of hundreds of thousands of people. But no matter how difficult it was, the decision still had to be made. After Division Commander Kong Ji and the guard captain Wu Xiaoyi looked at each other, the former said, "Commander, Shaojing City is now surrounded by Baiming's army. There is a shortage of food in the city. Even the soldiers have changed from 3 meals a day to 2 meals a day. Their combat strength is going to decline. Under such circumstances, we may have to surrender." As soon as Kong Ji finished speaking, the guard captain Wu Xiaoyi on the side agreed. "That's right. We are too weak. If we fight head-on, we won't have a good ending. So I agree to surrender to Baiming." The 2 right-hand men spoke at the same time. After hearing this, Shibi's face became very ugly. She even trembled all over. Obviously, she was very angry. Under such circumstances, Kong Ji didn't seem to see it. He still asked, "Commander, what do you mean?" "What do I mean? Of course I don't agree. So what if we die? At most, we will be a hero again after 18 years. But if we really surrender to Baiming, we will be cutting ourselves off from the 5th Star Army and the 6th Young Master. When that time comes, do you think you can live with your conscience? Even if we survive, we will be struggling at death's door. So, I will never surrender. At most, we will fight until both sides suffer. I believe that with a strong defense, even Baiming's army won't be able to take advantage of us. Even if we lose in the end, we will take a bite out of them." Shibi said these words with a face full of anger. It was completely different from his usual calmness. He was really angry. He didn't expect that the 2 people he trusted the most would choose to surrender. This was what he couldn't stand. With this angry shout, Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi instantly became mute. Obviously, they didn't expect that the usually calm and resourceful commander would act so crazily. However, after a few moments, Kong Ji was the first to react. He also said in a very emotional tone, "Commander, are you really going to choose to fight head-on? Don't you know that if you really do this, it means that hundreds of thousands of people will die? How can you bear to do this?" "Of course I can't bear to do this, but compared to the 6th Young Master's importance, I am more unwilling to betray him, even if it means death." Shibi's voice was resolute and decisive. At this moment, It seemed like Shibi had made the final decision. Shibi was the commander of an army. If he made this decision, then the matter was basically settled. Therefore, these words were the final decision. If nothing unexpected happened, Rong Xiao would come to the residence tomorrow and get this result. Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi should have been furious when they heard the result. After all, their lives had been lost as well. However, for some reason, not only were they not angry, they even chuckled. Ha ha ha, 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 ha ha ha. Xia Biao had been waiting for the two of them to interrogate him, and had even prepared himself for a big fight, when he suddenly heard endless laughter. At this moment, even he didn't know what was going on, so he looked at the two of them. Kong Ji and Wu Xiaoyi stood at attention almost at the same time, then solemnly saluted him. Commander, we are sorry. Just now we were just testing you. In fact, we have the same thoughts as you. We can't let down the 5-star army, and we can't let down Bugnam of Gojoseon. Shibi saw the two's actions. At this moment, he finally understood what was going on. He couldn't help but shake his head with a bitter smile. To be honest, the two of you really made me angry just now. I thought there was something wrong with my eyes again. Hee, we can't learn from people like Su Yuan. I was personally chosen by the 6th young master. How could I do such a thing? That's right. First, he reprimanded Su Yuan verbally. Then, Kong Ji continued, Commander, your choice and loyalty are admirable and we should learn from you. However, the matter of Shajing City cannot be delayed. We must give you an explanation. What explanation do you need? Of course, we refuse to surrender and prepare to fight. This time, Shibi said without hesitation. No. Unexpectedly, Kong Ji, who just said that they couldn't let down the 5-star army and Bugnam of Gojoseon, changed his mind. Commander, we can't fight. If we fight, our new 2nd army will definitely be defeated. Even the hundreds of thousands of civilians in the 2 cities won't be any better. We can't fight? Then we have to surrender? This time, Shibi was confused by Kong Ji's words. That's right. We can only surrender. Kong Ji's voice was firm as he spoke. As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Xiaoyi, who had been silent for a long time, said, We can only surrender. Commander, this is what we think. For the entire night, the candlelight in the study room never went out. As for what the three of them talked about, even the housekeeper who was in charge of guarding the door didn't know. The sky was finally bright, and those who were supposed to come would come. Just after breakfast, the merchant Rong Xiao, accompanied by the infantry division commander Su Yuan, appeared at the headquarters of the new 2nd army. Not only them, but there were also hundreds of infantry soldiers who came with them. They were all armed. The appearance of these people was a signal. If Shibi didn't agree to surrender, they would be responsible for protecting Su Yuan and Rong Xiao until they safely left the headquarters of the new 2nd army. They were even willing to fight among themselves. In the main hall of the headquarters of the new 2nd army, Shibi sat there quietly. Although it was not late for the entire night, his eyes were still bright and full of spirit. At this moment, he was sitting there and watching everything that happened in the courtyard with an expressionless face. Especially when he saw Su Yuan appear with hundreds of soldiers, he couldn't help but snort coldly. Su Yuan, are you planning to rebel? Under Shibi's leadership for many years, Su Yuan was more or less a little afraid. However, when he saw Rong Xiao beside him and the soldiers behind him, he couldn't help but feel a little more confident. Commander, you know that I won't be your enemy. I'm only doing this to protect myself. Humph, I knew you wouldn't have the guts to do so. Seeing Su Yuan take the initiative to show weakness, Shibi snorted coldly. Then he looked at Rong Xiao and said, You're here for an answer, right? General, she is wise. You said 20 days will pass, but I wonder what you'll choose? Rong Xiao chuckled and spoke with the attitude of a victor. Sigh. After letting out a long sigh, Shibi did not immediately answer. Instead, he first raised his head to look at the sky before standing up with a sad expression. He walked into his courtyard and knelt on the ground under everyone's gazes. He was kneeling in the direction of the beginning city. 6th young master, I've let you down. If you want to be angry, you can just kill or torture me. I'm doing this for the sake of the hundreds of thousands of soldiers and citizens. Chapter 1133. Rong Xiao, who was watching from the side, couldn't help showing a hint of fondness in his eyes. He seemed to have thought of the result that the other party was going to give. It seemed that Shibi had made the decision to surrender. If so, he could take down Xiajing and Jianghu without shedding any blood. As the executor, he would make a great contribution. At that time, his future would be limitless. As Rong Xiao expected, after a while, Shibi stood up and made the decision to surrender to Baiming, but he still put forward two conditions. First, everything he had now was given by Bugnam of Gojoseon, so he would never be his enemy. He could help Baiming deal with other enemies, except for Xianxia and the 5-star army. Second, no one could hurt the 100,000 people in Xiajing and Jianghu. Even if they did something extreme, as long as they didn't rebel against Baiming, no one could be caught, let alone killed. If Baiming could agree to the two conditions, as the commander of the new Second Army, Shibi could draft a letter of surrender to Baiming and announce it to the world. Shibi finally made a decision, and it was a decision that satisfied him. Rong Xiao was already very happy, so he nodded and agreed. General Shibi's two conditions, I agree on behalf of Baiming. Please write the letter to the world now. There's no hurry. Let's talk about it after you write down the two conditions. To be honest, I don't trust you. She looked at Rong Xiao with some disdain. Her eyes were extremely cold. Well said, well said. But before that, shouldn't General Shibi express something first? After all, I can't completely trust you. Rong Xiao rolled his eyes, suppressing the anger in his heart from being looked down upon, and said thoughtfully. Yes, but how should I express it? Shibi asked back. This. Rong Xiao first glanced at Su Yuan beside him, then said thoughtfully, why don't you give the order to completely hand over the safety of Xiajing City to General Su? This way you can show your sincerity. Although Su Yuan was still the commander of the new Second Army's infantry division, it seemed that he had already surrendered to Baiming. With him in charge of the city's safety, Rong Xiao and Baiming would be relieved. Shibi naturally knew this, so after pondering for a moment, he nodded and agreed, okay, I agree. Ha ha ha, good. Rong Xiao couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. Once Su Yuan was in charge of the city's defense, it would be difficult for Shibi to go back on his word. At the very least, if they really fought, Su Yuan would only need to open the city gates and Baiming's army would be able to rush in. At that time, with the advantage of more than 10 times their military strength, victory would definitely belong to them. Forced, Shibi finally made the decision to surrender. Although this was betraying Yang Chendong, it also saved the lives of hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians. When the news first spread out from the city, when it came from the mouth of Infantry Division Commander Su Yuan, many of the soldiers and commoners in the city who heard this news all shed tears. Most of them joined Xianxia's big family later, but even so, they still enjoyed many benefits. They originally thought that their lives would change greatly and become better and better, but the sudden appearance of Baiming's army shattered all their fantasies. Now, they had returned to Baiming and became Baiming's people. It was impossible to say that they didn't have any thoughts in their hearts. However, the situation was like this. Facing Baiming's army that was like a wolf and a tiger, what could they do? Were they really going to risk their lives? If that was the case, no one would be able to survive. Rong Xiao acted very quickly. In just 5 days, he received a letter of guarantee written by Baiming's commander, Shi Heng, agreeing to give up the two requirements. Shibi didn't act shamelessly after that. He took out the document that he had written long ago. It stated that the two cities, Xiajing and Jianghu, would belong to Baiming from now on. They would leave the embrace of Xianxia, which was also Bugnam of Gojoseon. After receiving the document, Rong Xiao quickly announced it to the world and spread it widely. First city. In Xianxia City, which was the closest city to Xiajing City, the army commander, Tiger's Mane, immediately called for a military meeting when he saw the document written by Shibi. They reached a very unified goal, which was to absolutely not let this happen. They had to leave Xiajing City and give it to the new Second Army. No. Now, it should be said that the Baiming army was powerful and let them know that betraying Bugnam of Gojoseon would definitely not end well. The one who led the troops was Ma Xiangshan, the commander of the new First Army's light cavalry regiment. As a light cavalry regiment, their advantage was that they were fast enough. They could be described as coming and going like the wind. With such an advantage, even if they encountered danger, they had a great chance to escape. Unfortunately, they went out with a face of anger. However, not long after they left the first city, they met Fong Dingshan, who had been waiting here for a long time. Fong Dingshan led the Liaodong Iron Cavalry, which had expanded to 70,000 people, and set up a formation. It was as if as long as they rushed over, they would kill all of them. Although Ma Xiangshan was very angry, considering the comparison of the forces of both sides and the fact that the Liaodong Iron Cavalry was also an elite cavalry force, in the end, his rationality prevailed over the anger in his heart. He had to order the army to retreat and return to the first city behind him. Without the external force, Shajing City and Jingzhou City fell into the hands of the Baiming army as they wished. In order to achieve the goal of completely controlling these two cities, the Baiming commander Shi Hang, who was now in charge of the security of this area, ordered more than 100,000 Baiming army to enter the two cities. In addition, Su Yuan's infantry division was firmly on the side of Baiming. At this moment, the advantage of the military strength fell into the hands of Baiming. After the fall of the two cities, especially after the 100,000 Baiming army entered, they were not people who followed the rules. Gradually, there were some incidents of burning and looting. Perhaps it was because their military pay was too low, and there were many good things in the two cities. Under the greed, there were many open robberies. In just a single day's time, more than 10 shops were robbed, over 100 women were taken, and several dozen commoners were killed on the streets. Because of this, he was extremely unhappy. He wrote a letter to Commander Shi Hang, expressing the resentment in his heart. Unfortunately, even if Shi Hang personally stepped in, he could only control the situation from worsening. As for the Baiming soldiers who robbed and killed before, none of them were punished. Obviously, Baiming had used a compromise. They did not want to anger Shi Bi and cause a mutiny among the 3 cavalry divisions of the new Second Army, but they also did not want to hurt the morale of their own soldiers. Naturally, Shi Bi was not happy about this. However, he did not expect that his guard captain Wu Xiaoyi would actually ride out of the manor alone in a fit of anger. He charged into the northern Ming military camp in broad daylight and found a few criminals. The northern Ming soldiers who had killed the commoners did not say a word and killed them with a saber. Wu Xiaoyi's actions naturally attracted the anger of the other Baiming soldiers. After being surrounded, he was finally captured alive. Then, the matter was reported to Shi Bi. Shi Bi was still living in the city lord's mansion, and did not seem to have been stripped of any power. However, when Rong Xiao and Su Yuan appeared here again, their expressions were clearly much more arrogant than before. In the past, they had come to ask for help. However, this time, they came to denounce them, so their aura was naturally different. In the hall, Rong Xiao questioned Shi Bi. He said that because of guard captain Wu Xiaoyi, 4 Baiming soldiers had died. This matter had caused the army to be extremely dissatisfied, and an explanation had to be given. Explanation? What explanation? You promised me before that you would not harm the people in the city. What did you do? Guard Captain Wu only acted out of indignation. You can say that he was willing to do so. Shi Bi naturally would not allow the other party to criticize him and took the initiative to counterattack. Even if you are dissatisfied, you can't just casually charge into the army camp and kill people. If you don't follow the rules, how can we explain this to the soldiers? Therefore, Wu Xiaoyi must die. Of course, we were also in the wrong before. How about this? General Shi Bi will personally deal with Wu Xiaoyi. This can be considered as us giving you face. Furthermore, we can guarantee that no one will harass the people in the city in the future. Rong Xiao had already thought of what to say. At this moment, he appeared to be awe-inspiring and righteous. However, they did not kill Wu Xiaoyi and instead handed him over to Shi Bi for him to kill. This action was truly too sinister. Hearing this, Shi Bi's eyes flashed with uncontrollable anger. Just as he was about to say something, Rong Xiao spoke again. General Shi, don't forget that we agreed before. If someone rebels, then we have the authority to deal with them. Your guard captain actually charged into our Baiming army to kill people. Isn't that no different from a rebellion? Of course, if you can't be ruthless enough to deal with him, then you can hand him over to our army. However, I'm afraid that if we do that, Wu Xiaoyi will suffer even more. This was a threat. However, Shi Bi could not say anything. Who told Wu Xiaoyi to be so impulsive? In order to prevent the people in the city from being bullied and for the security of the two cities to return to peace, Shibi had no choice but to agree. Tears flowed from the corners of her eyes as she said, "All right, we'll do as you say." Haha, very good. Shibi finally compromised. All of this fell into Rong Xiao's eyes and made him very happy. He believed that once the news of Wu Xiaoyi being killed by Shibi spread, this new Second Army commander's authority would be suppressed to the lowest level. At that time, even if he had any disloyalty, he would not be able to stir up any waves. Not long after Rong Xiao left, Wu Xiaoyi was sent to the city lord's manor. Following him was the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, Kong Ji. He knelt on the ground and pleaded with the other guards, namely Shibi's personal guards. Chapter 1134. Although Shibi couldn't bear all of this, he still issued the order to execute Wu Xiaoyi in the end. The execution was carried out in the courtyard of the city lord's mansion. Present were Shibi, Kong Ji, a group of personal guards, and several supervisors sent by the Baiming army. Shibi's eyes were filled with tears, and he shouted the word, "Kill," in pain. After laughing, Wu Xiaoyi's head fell to the ground. When the news spread out, the whole city was in an uproar. Everyone felt that there was no hope for the future. Because of this matter, Shibi also developed a grudge with Kong Ji and the other 2 cavalry division commanders. It was said that even if it was his order, the 3 division commanders began to resist. Rong Xiao heard this news in the mansion in the city. Of course, he was very satisfied. He believed that it wouldn't be long before there was internal strife among Shibi and the others. That would be the time to deal with these high-level figures. At that time, it would be the time for them to send people to seize the military power. Jing and Jianghu seemed to have calmed down. As time passed, when the morale of the army and the people's hearts were slack, they would completely belong to Baiming. And for all of this, the 5-star army didn't seem to do anything, especially the first city. It seemed that they couldn't even protect themselves because after dealing with Jing and Jianghu, hundreds of thousands of Baiming troops began to surround the first city. An even bigger storm seemed to be about to begin. The new Dusi area had now been renamed Liaodong by Zhu Qiyu. In the sea town of the Twin City Guard, which was the town that Yang Chendong first came to when he attacked the grassland, it was very lively at the moment. Countless 5-star army came ashore from here. They disguised themselves as Baiming sea soldiers and entered the town with lightning speed. When the 200 Baiming soldiers guarding the town realized that something was wrong, they were already on the chopping block. The army that appeared here was the 5-star army led by Yang Chendong. Moreover, it was the main force of the army. For example, the army that came along this time was the 4th Army Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, and the new army. In addition, there were also 30,000 C-ranked soldiers transferred from Korea. The 3 divisions of the 4th Army Division had been deployed from the war against the Japanese Empire, and they were only the first batch. Following closely behind them were even more troops that had retreated from the battlefield of the Japanese Empire. As the vanguard troops, these 3 troops became Yang Chendong's fist forces. Their mission was to open a new passage here that led to the origin city from the outside world. In the past, Liaodong region was part of Baiming's territory. Even if Yang Chendong had any ideas, he would have suppressed them because of the general situation. But now they had already targeted the new Second Army. What was there to hesitate about? It was impolite not to reciprocate. Yang Chendong was not a person who would not retaliate. Compared to other people, he was originally a vengeful person. It was just that many times the time was not ripe, and some of his ideas had not been formed yet. Looking at Baiming now, Korea and the Japanese Empire had been included in Xianxia's territory. At this time, Yang Chendong did not have so many concerns. Not to mention, this time, Baiming had provoked him first. Even if he fought back, it could be considered that he had a legitimate reason. Sea Town became Yang Chendong's first gate when he entered this place. It had to be said that Northern Ming was also filled with talents. Furthermore, this place was very close to the coast. It wasn't that no one had considered the possibility of the 5-star army suddenly making a move. Although the probability of this happening was too small in many people's eyes, the nearby city guards still arranged for 200 people to be stationed here. They also prepared enough beacon towers to ensure that if there was an emergency, they would be able to warn the other cities and city guards in advance, giving them enough time to prepare. But obviously, they had miscalculated again. With regards to the situation here, the Yang faction's intelligence department had already investigated thoroughly. They captured Song Yong alive and detained all of the Northern Bright Sea Division so that they could send their army here without attracting any attention. Now it seemed that this first step was right. At least, the Baiming army outside Sea Town had not discovered them yet. Young master, what should we do next? Beta Persei stood beside Yang Chendong with his hand holding the hilt of his sword. There was some excitement on his face. Previously, when they were in the Japanese Empire, they had heard that Baiming had attacked the grassland and surrounded the two cities of Shaojing and Jingzhou. It was only because the Japanese Empire's war at that time that they really did not have the spare energy to take care of this place that the Baiming army had been arrogant for a few days. Now that the war in the Japanese Empire had finally ended, it was naturally time for them to take revenge. It could be said that Yang Er and the other warriors were filled with anger when they came here. Their first opponent was only around 200 people, and they had come here in the form of a surprise attack. This number of enemies was really not enough to fight, not enough to look at. Hearing Beta Persei's question, Division Commander Ling Duqiang, Division Commander Tian Hu, and Commander Su He all looked at Yang Chendong with shining eyes. Yang Chendong, who had already changed into a black armor, was now riding on the white dragon, looking into the distance thoughtfully. This was not the first time he had appeared in Sea Town, but compared to before, the pressure on him this time was obviously greater. It was not for anything else, but because his opponent this time was Baiming, the so-called orthodox in the eyes of the world. Even if the great Ming dynasty was divided into two, Baiming's power could not be underestimated. The intelligence department showed that the other side had an army of more than 4 million soldiers, and this was not enough. They were still expanding, and this number alone was not easy to deal with. Not to mention, Yang Chendong still had so many family members and businesses in the capital of Baiming. Perhaps if his business was gone, he could start again. If his money was gone, he could earn it again. But if his family members were gone, then it would be too late for Yang Chendong to regret. Fortunately, Baiming did not seem to have any intention of falling out with Yang Chendong. At least from the intelligence department's information, his family members were not targeted by Baiming, and even his business was still running. Thinking about it, Yang Chendong was not only Baiming's enemy, but also the enemy of the southern Ming dynasty and the kingdom of Huara's Yes-Hen. Moreover, he was so powerful that Baiming had to go all out to fight with him. If both sides suffered heavy losses, even if they won, it would be a Pyrrhic victory. At that time, it would only give their opponent an opportunity. This was also the reason why Baiming did not want to fall out with Yang Chendong. They only wanted to eliminate Xianxia's forces around them, and then vigorously develop themselves. But even if it was this request, Yang Chendong would not easily agree. The grasslands were not Baiming's sphere of influence to begin with. Everything in the first city was obtained by Yang Chendong and his brothers step by step. Why, seeing that the meat was fat enough, now you want to kill it to satisfy your cravings? How could there be such a good thing in the world? From the moment he appeared here, Yang Chendong was already prepared to fall out with Baiming. The only difference was to what extent he would fall out with them in the end. Now that Beta Persei asked, he naturally would not be polite. He nodded lightly and said, "The next step is naturally to fight. Since someone has snatched 2 of our cities and dealt with one of our armies, then we will return the favor tenfold. Men, bring me the map." As soon as he finished speaking, Long Wei quickly sent the map to Yang Chendong. Then, he pointed to the Shuangqing guards closest to Sea Town and said, "Commander Ling, take your 4th division and set off from here. First, capture this city. Remember, it's best if you don't hurt anyone. Then, follow me to the Terran area." "Yes." The commander of the 4th division, Ling Duqiang, immediately stood at attention and said with a happy expression. This was equivalent to the first battle, and this was handed over to Lung Feng. This was enough to prove the 6th young master's trust in them. Yang Chendong pointed to many places on the map one after another, then looked at Su He and asked in a deep voice, "Commander Su, from Shuangqing guards to the west, the Ajulan guards, the Tun guards, the Fuyu guards, the Duoyen guards, all the way to the Wonan River guards, as well as a large area in the north. I'll leave it all to you. Do you have the confidence to take them down one by one?" Su He's face was solemn, but his expression showed that he was extremely excited. He immediately stood at attention and said, "Please rest assured, Bug Nam of Gojoseon. Our new army promises to complete the mission." "Very good." Yang Chendong nodded in satisfaction. Finally his gaze fell on Tian Hu and said, With all the targets of the new army as a front line, this will be your defense area. In short, no reinforcements from Baiming are allowed to set foot here. If one appears, you will defeat it. Do you have a problem? No problem. Tianhu promised. As the #1 cavalry unit, the commander of the 1st Cavalry Division, their mobility had always been the strongest. They were the most suitable to intercept reinforcements. The 3 capable generals had divided the work. The moment Yang Qindong ordered people to put away the map, he looked forward with bright eyes and said, "Very good. Since that's the case, everyone go and prepare. We will set off in 4 hours. Do not slack off." With the order, Yang Qindong's first initiative to mobilize troops against Baiming officially began. This also meant that Yang Qindong had enough confidence to compete with Baiming for the world. After the end of the naval battle, the land battle officially began. Shuangqing guards Jianghu He-ing. He was currently resting in his mansion in Shuangqing. He didn't feel that the war had begun and that he was in danger. This couldn't be blamed on him. Since Baiming began to vigorously develop their military, the status of the soldiers had increased a lot. Especially with the establishment of the Liaodong cavalry, many of the troublemakers in this area were recruited. Without those troublemakers causing trouble, He-ing felt that the security was a lot better. Therefore, during this period of time, he was very comfortable as a Qianhu. After dinner, he would hug his new concubine and sleep soundly in the room. It was really a happy thing in the world. It was wonderful. You're tuning in to the Wisdom Diary YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.